That's New York City for you.
Yeah.
It's like $25 a cocktail.
Right.
Watered down.
Yeah.
It's the Awesemo NBA Deeper Dive Show, Wednesday edition, 10-game slate. I'm Rinpak. The show sponsored by PrizePicks, but joining live from New York City is Adam. How are you doing today, Adam?
Doing pretty well. Enjoying my week, which might turn into more than a week, depending on the snowstorm this weekend in New York City. So having a good time. And excited to talk some basketball with you.
Have you did you have your overpriced lunch by chance already?
Yeah, I went. So it ended up not being too bad because I got like to-go food. There's like a sports bar right across from my hotel, and so I just ran out. I was like, oh, I'll grab a beer, grab food, left my food on the bar, came back, did my afternoon shows, and was like, shit, I need to go back and get my food. And the bartender felt bad, so at least he like comped me a drink while I was there.
Nice. One of my favorite fast casual restaurants called Cava in New York City. You got to check it out. I've heard
good things. I've never had it, but I've heard good things.
You got to go. That's one thing when I go to New York City, like my friend showed it to me. All my best friends from college live there. And I'm craving Cava at random points of the day, and I haven't had it in 2 years.
Yeah. It's in other cities too, right?
I don't know. I've only had it in New York City.
Oh, okay. I want to say there's one near me where I live that I haven't had it. But yeah, no, definitely heard of it. Had Nobu the other night for dinner to celebrate the golf win. That was fantastic.
Oh yeah. Nobu's pretty fantastic. They opened up one in Chicago, and the Chicago Nobu is the only rooftop Nobu in the world.
Okay.
And it's a good spot in the West Loop. But if you ever come out to Chicago, it's a great time. And Nobu's always hits a spot, no denying that. But let's talk about this 10-game slate. Yesterday we had a 9 gamer. Today we have a 10 gamer. I fully expect for shit to hit the fan throughout the night, just because there are a handful of teams that are on back to back. But let's get right to it. Charlotte taking on Indiana, 229.5 total. One of the higher ones on the slate. Charlotte's favored by 1.5. This Charlotte team has been pissing me off. Headlined by LaMelo Ball. I've been chasing this guy nonstop over the last 2 weeks, and maybe he's had one good game. He was one of my higher owned players yesterday, but LaMelo Ball checks in at $8,100 on DK, $7,600 on FanDuel. I like chasing him yet again. I think everything grades out for him to be a pretty solid play. Great value. I think raw points seems pretty on par, especially at that FanDuel. I'm willing to go over that salary. But in this game environment, potentially the Gordon Hayward news is going to be pretty big because it might open up extra usage for guys like Bridges, Rozier. We saw PJ Washington get ejected last game. I was hoping we might see more Kelly Oubre minutes that way. It just is not working out for Kelly O. Talk to me about the Charlotte Hornets team.
Yeah, I mean, I think Charlotte is a pretty interesting team tonight. Obviously, we're waiting on the Hayward news, and I think that's important in that I don't anticipate, like, I don't think he really matters from a production standpoint all that much for guys. He's, like a 20.5% usage guy. I don't think that you see anyone step up in the sense that, like, oh, his usage rate really jumps. But if you take Hayward out of the rotation, we have typically seen Charlotte this year, when they're missing a main piece, just kind of give more guys to their normal rotation players as opposed to throwing someone from the bench in. So, I think that if Hayward's out, you're likely to see, and we didn't really see this last game, you only got 30 minutes, but he didn't play in the fourth, but you're likely to see Bridges go from like 34 to 35 minutes to 38. You can certainly get a couple more minutes for Ball, for Rozier. Washington played 31 2 games ago, got ejected last game. You could certainly see him approach 30 again if Hayward's out. Oubre played like 28 off the bench last game. If Hayward's in, I still think guys like LaMelo look fine, and Bridges looks fine, and PJ Washington's okay. But you're just going to be able to feel a little bit more confident about these Charlotte pieces if Hayward is out.
For sure. And if Gordon Hayward were to play today, $6,200 on DK, a very favorable $5,800 on FanDuel. Even his Yahoo price tag comes in at $25. Is he someone you're going to take your chances on? I know he's dealing with some sort of foot injury at this moment. Would you be willing to take some chances on being over the field on like Gordon Hayward tonight?
He doesn't really stand out to me. Like if he's in, it's just, you're expecting 32, 33 minutes somewhere in there at 6,200. I think it's, if he ends up in a lineup or two, it's fine, but it's just not somebody that I'm that interested in. Like he's not been, for the most part, hasn't been that productive this year. Certainly he has a ceiling. You get those random, really good games, but wouldn't really stand out to me here, I don't think.
Fair enough. For those who are tuning in for the first time today, the show is sponsored by PrizePicks, and at the site we have a free PrizePicks tool. And why you should be playing on PrizePicks, it's a very prop-friendly, kind of prop-friendly site for you to take advantage of. By using our free tool, our free tool is indicating to take your chances on the under on Terry Rozier's assists. The prop line comes in at 5.5. We have a projection of 4.1, leading to an expected win percentage of 79%. So make sure to use the promo code Awesemo. There's a direct link at the NBA free PrizePicks tool on the site. I'll drop it in the chat for you guys. And if you use the promo code Awesemo, you will get if you deposit $100, we will match your deposit up to $100. So make sure to take advantage of that. I just dropped the link in the YouTube chat. So make sure to take advantage of that. On to the Indiana side we go. Indiana comes in with a just decimated team. Obviously, we know no Sabonis, no Miles Turner, no Malcolm Brogdon. Now this leads it to be the Karis LeVert show. $8,600 DK, $7,800 on FanDuel, an awesome $30 price tag on Yahoo. Karis LeVert, to me, seems like a pretty awesome play. I would like him to continue to take more shots, the most shots on this team. It's a good value across the board on FanDuel. Not at the greatest value on DK, but raw points. But he has the upside to really carry your lineup on a 10-game slate, in my opinion. Talk to me about LeVert.
I absolutely love LeVert here. I really liked him the other night too. He didn't really come through. But kind of the way I pointed it out with Josh this morning is, not to say that the 38 DraftKings points he got the other night was a floor game. Like, I'm sure he could do worse. But he still had 21 field goal attempts. He had 8 assists, 6 rebounds. He just happened to shoot 8 for 21 from the field. And it's not that Karis LeVert's efficient. He can certainly have another poor shooting game, but this is a good matchup against Charlotte. He's got a 31% usage rate without Brogdon or Sabonis on the floor. His assist percentage is up around 30%. I think that, like, I agree that 8,600 on DraftKings isn't a great value, but I still think there's a massive ceiling here. Like, it shouldn't surprise anybody if you get a 50 to 55 fantasy point game from LeVert tonight at a pretty reasonable salary.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And shout out to Michigan. Karis LeVert is pretty awesome play on FanDuel and Yahoo. And I think he's a pretty good play on DraftKings as well. Willing to go over the ownership on a guy like him, just because I know he has the potential to give you that upside in the lineup. Now, I feel like in this type of matchup, the Vegas total is definitely there. There could be a second tier pacer that could be good. A guy who I was targeting earlier was Goga Batadze, 5,500 FanDuel, $6,500 DK. One of the better plays on Yahoo, and coming in so with the ownership at $14. Does anyone else besides Goga, are you willing to take your chances on Goga? And does anyone else, another pacer that you are willing to go over the field on? And is there a pacer that you're absolutely avoiding tonight?
I mean, so assuming Goga starts, I think that's a reasonable spot to get to. Like, it's still a really good matchup against Charlotte. He played 35 minutes a couple of games ago. Last game, you got just a really weird rotation where not only was he in foul trouble, he lost minutes in the first quarter, the second quarter, and the third quarter, but he also didn't start the second half. They went with a smaller lineup. So if he's assuming he's in the starting lineup tonight, I think you can still, assume he's going to get 30 or so minutes and certainly could play more. But you also do have a lot of good center options tonight. So a lot of it's going to come down to ownership there. I don't think there's any doubting his ceiling if he starts. It's just, how easy is it to prioritize him at that salary given the other options we have at center? Beyond him, on DraftKings at least, I don't see a ton. Like, Chris Duarte's salaries come up. Torrey Craig is almost 5K. I don't hate taking some shots at a $4,400 Jeremy Lamb. You got O'Shea Brissett playing 32 minutes last game. He picked up minutes with Goga not playing as much. That's a spot where you could hope the same sort of thing happens. But really, I see it as LeVert, the clear number one. Goga, if he starts, being an interesting tournament option. And then basically guys like Jeremy Lamb and O'Shea Brissett just as like dart throws.
Shout out to Ryan Elson. Michigan needs to take care of Northwestern as 8-point favorites tonight. And yes, they do. I do think this Michigan team is going to figure things out. Caleb Houston is a sharpshooter, and I believe he was freshman of the week. So keep an eye on the Michigan basketball team. They should turn things around. But yeah, I completely agree with you there. I do want to pick my poison with some of these other pacer guys. The game environment suits both teams. So I do want to take my chances on guys like a Lamb, guys like a Goga on Yahoo especially. So any final thoughts on this game before we jump on over to the next one?
Someone asked if we were forgetting it's a 10-game slate talking about LeVert. No, I mean, 10 games, if somebody goes for 55, 60 to 8,600, that still plays.
No, we try to on a 10-game slate. I do think Adam's probably with me. We like highlighting the important plays and plays that will stick out throughout a 10-game slate, and we'll zoom through ones that really don't stick out to us. So on to Milwaukee and Cleveland we go. Milwaukee checks in as only 3.5-point favorites against probably the most impressive NBA team this year in the Cavs. 218 total. But let's start on the Milwaukee side of things. There is Giannis Antetokounmpo, 11-8 on DK, 11-2 FanDuel, $56 on Yahoo. Giannis, whenever he's on the slate, obviously has tournament winning upside. He is coming in very, very low owned at 11-8. At the projected ownership we have, our ownership projections are free today. So feel free to check that out, what it's coming in at. With everyone back on deck, I'm not that interested in going to Giannis, and it scares me just because Giannis just can burn me if I don't have him.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't think Giannis really stands out here. This is a slate where, you have Jokic, maybe without Barton, but either way, you have Jokic. You have Harden without Kyrie and without Durant. Those guys are just going to look better than Giannis at a similar price tag, a little bit more than Harden, a little bit less than Jokic in a tough matchup against Cleveland. But that being said, Giannis is still the best point per minute guy in the NBA outside of Nikola Jokic this year. And even on average, you're talking about like a 1.65 fantasy point per minute guy for Giannis. That's even better than Harden produces without Kyrie and without Durant. Now, you expect Harden to play probably 5 to 7 minutes more than Giannis, and that's why Harden looks better. But when you're just talking from a ceiling standpoint and, slate winning potential, getting Giannis at 3% is never a bad idea. It's just a matter of, how much can you really get to. Bobby Portis, I think, looks okay. Dante DiVincenzo looks okay at $4,000. But there's nothing here that really stands out to me outside of saying guys like Giannis and Portis have very high ceilings at low ownership.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't mind going to a $7,600 Drew Holiday on FanDuel. There was before he got hurt and he was balling out. So he's fine. Everyone just seems priced appropriately / too expensive just because they're all back together. There was a long stretch where 2 or 3 of these guys were in or out amongst the whole team. So it's a Milwaukee team, like you said, getting Giannis at that low ownership. Yeah, we know what the opportunity cost is. That you're potentially going to miss out on rostering a Nikola Jokic and a James Harden. Both grade out as just better plays on the slate, but we know what Giannis can bring to the table on tonight's 10-game slate. Outside of that, I don't have real interest in Milwaukee, but I do think you can target the under on Giannis's rebound prop. Comes in at prop line 11. We have him or just around 10.3 right now. Expected win percentage at 67%. Shout out to Price Picks. Make sure to use that deposit bonus up to $100 using the promo code Awesemo. Any final thoughts on Milwaukee, Adam?
Nope.
All right, on to Cleveland we go. This Cleveland team, obviously, I expect Darius Garland to get the All-Star nomination. I do think tomorrow's when they announce starters, but he should be an All-Star this season. Someone from Cleveland deserves to be an All-Star, and I hope it's Darius Garland because he's been playing like that. Garland's earned a $9,400 price tag on DK. He's too expensive for me over there. FanDuel, $8,600. I think you can go to him, but he's not priced as favorably as some other guys. I look to the front court. It's a Milwaukee matchup. There's no Lauri Markkanen, Jared Allen, and Evan Mobley. Jared Allen, I believe, is still questionable. If he's going to get ruled out, that will change a lot for this Cleveland team, as we saw the other night. So that is the biggest news for this Cleveland team we're waiting on. And it will open things up, and especially Evan Mobley. He's already a pretty solid play at $6,900 on FanDuel. But outside of this Jared Allen news, can we go to anyone on Cleveland with a lot of confidence? It's coming in. I mean, outside of Mobley and Dean Wade is the guy who's getting some ownership on DK. How do we handle this Cleveland team tonight?
It's a bunch of guys that I think make some sense at low ownership, but not a lot that stands out to me. Dean Wade at 3,100 on DraftKings, I totally get that, with or without Allen. Like if Allen is in, I still think you're probably getting 28 to 30 minutes from Wade. He's not very exciting, but he is 3,100. He'll open up plenty for you elsewhere in your lineup. If Allen's out, you could certainly add a few more minutes onto that minutes projection for Wade. Still not the kind of guy where I'm particularly concerned that not having him prevents me from winning a tournament, but he does open up a lot of stuff for you. Beyond that, like if Allen is in, you're still probably getting 22-ish minutes from Kevin Love. If you want to take shots on that in tournaments, then fine. He's like a 1.3 fantasy point per minute guy, but there's nothing that, looks super appealing about a 6K price tag there. Mobley on FanDuel looks pretty good. On DraftKings, he's 8,100. I expect him to play plenty of minutes tonight against Milwaukee, but still appropriately priced. You mentioned it with Garland, 9,400. He deserves it. If he were cheaper, I'd really like him. Here, it's kind of just like if he ends up in a lineup here and there, like I think he plays 37, 38 minutes. He certainly has a ceiling, but he doesn't stand out compared to other guys. So I think this is a really difficult team to prioritize really one way or the other, because even if Allen is out, you get a 3K Ed Davis that maybe if he avoids foul trouble, he gets to 24 minutes, but you're still talking about a very deep center position. I have a really hard time pointing to one guy here and saying I want a lot of this guy.
Yeah, and the opportunity cost of the center positions, it's there today. And there's Jokic on the slate, and that's if Jokic does what he's been doing all season long in Brooklyn matchup where I think it's fine, we'll get to that game, but I don't think I could go to Ed Davis on this type of slate with no Allen. It's news is really important, so make sure to follow the Awesemo NBA handle to be on top of all the news and starting lineups over there. Shout out to News God. But hit the like button, everyone. On to the next game we go. Clippers taking on the Magic. The Clippers are coming off an amazing victory last night. Unfortunately, your Wizards just had to blow that game, but Clippers are only favored by 1 point, 214.5 total against the Magic. The Clippers team, we saw Ty Lue gave the middle finger to the starters, and he brought in a whole new starting five, and the whole new starting five put on a historic performance. Shout out to Luke Kennard, I believe, put up 7 points in 9 seconds. Pretty remarkable.
Yeah, to lock down that game and win it for the Clippers. Yep.
I think NBA teams are 1 in 12,396. down, I think, 7 points with like 30 seconds to go or something ridiculous. And the Clippers were the second team ever to do it. Now we come to an Orlando slate where I believe Marcus Morris is still out with personal issues. So the Orlando matchup is pretty cake. So I think going back to this Clippers team and potentially the starters, I have some interest here because of the matchup. And I think I hope the starters play with like a little chip on the shoulder after just getting benched on the front end of back-to-back. Reggie Jackson, 6,500, 6,800 on DK and FanDuel. He has the upside to put up 35, 40. At that type of price tag, you'll be obviously very content with it. He just doesn't do it on a consistent basis. And Ty Lue really pisses me off with the rotation, what he can do. We just saw what he did last night. Now, everyone's kind of priced too expensive across the board. The one guy I think I will have some confidence in going to just because of his minutes when he gets them is Luke Kennard, $4,200, $4,600 on FanDuel and DraftKings, and a very favorable $11 price tag on Yahoo. Talk about this Clippers team, and can we trust Ty Lue?
No, you can't. And so the thing with the Clippers here is they're running a really deep rotation in general right now. They are playing a lot of bodies. Marcus Morris being out makes it so you can take some shots at these guys. I personally think the 16% ownership coming into Luke Kennard right now is batshit crazy. Maybe he gets some more minutes because he played really well last night. But assuming they go with the same starting lineup that they did last night, you got like 8 minutes in the first half from Luke Kennard, or 9 minutes, something like that. He played basically the entire second half, but Reggie Jackson didn't play a single minute. Nick Batum didn't play a single minute. I have a really hard time thinking that you can count on more than like 22 to 24 minutes from Luke Kennard, which is fine. That's the kind of play at 4,200 that I don't mind making in tournaments, assuming they're going to be low owned, because if he plays well, he can certainly get more minutes. But if people are just going to play him because he's relatively cheap and he had a good game last night under completely absurd conditions, to me, that's just kind of a weird spot to get to at that ownership. If the ownership were to come down between now and lock, then I like taking shots there. But 16% really kind of concerns me there. And kind of the same thing on Terrence Mann. Like he's 3,700. If he starts, I assume he's playing 30 to 32 minutes. I think that's a good value. I also think he might just be getting a little bit too much ownership. Like people look at what he did last night and ignore that he played the whole second half without Reggie Jackson. Like when you take Morris and Paul George off the floor, Terrence Mann still isn't a particularly productive DFS player. He's productive enough that he can get there in 30 minutes at 3,700 for sure. But you're talking about Reggie Jackson having a 29.6% usage rate without those guys on the floor. Taking that out just kind of makes everything that happened in the second half last night irrelevant, sort of, like as long as Jackson is playing tonight.
Yeah, I think you bring up excellent points there. My thing is like there's not amazing value on this slate. So sure. I think Kennard is someone can pay off for you, and Terrence Mann. And the only reason I say this, it's against an Orlando team. I know the Vegas total is not there, but I don't mind going above on a guy like Kennard, but I do think you bring up excellent points. If the recency bias is going to elevate that ownership, which I certainly think it could, and Ty Lue's, it's not a tight rotation by any means. So I do think you have some really strong points there as well. If I were to roster a Clipper, it would be, I think, kind of chalky. I would go with Mann and Kennard, but my third Clipper would probably be Reggie Jackson, who I target. Yeah,
I guess the way I view it is like the price tags on Mann and Kennard are cheap enough. They're still perfectly fine values because, like you said, there's not a ton, at least right now, there's not a ton of very good value on this slate. And they're cheap. Even if you say 24 minutes for Kennard, he can certainly get there at 4,200. 30 minutes for Mann, he can get there. So as value plays, I still get it. I think the ownership's a little bit inflated. But when you talk about guys that I think are projected to go a bit under-owned, Reggie Jackson just jumps off the page at 6,500. Not that I think, like you said, not that I think he comes through all that frequently, but if I can get a $6,500 guy playing what I think is likely to be 32 minutes against the Magic with a 30% usage rate and like a 30% assist percentage, that's pretty appealing to me at 3% owned.
Yeah. And I think that this is an interesting talking point on the slate just because I feel like someone in this game just can pop off and I just want to be on that guy. But that's just like a gut feeling of mine. But in terms of the data, like the data doesn't really support any of what we're saying. But
1.12 DraftKings points per minute for Jackson this year without George or Morris on the floor.
Yeah, and the last night was a very fluky outcome. Like that,
Right.
like almost is a happens maybe once in a NBA season type of situation. And I do think we can take advantage of that going to a guy like him today. So onto the Orlando side we go. Looking at the Orlando side of things, Jalen Suggs has come back and he started to ball out, and it just has slashed into everyone on this team, making this team very unappealing. Outside of a one very cheap Cole Anthony coming in at $5,300 and bringing the ownership with him over there on FanDuel. Looking over there on DK, we are seeing some ownership go to a guy like Franz Wagner. I believe Mo Bamba is going to be back in the lineup. So Wendell Carter was once appealing. He's fine, coming in at $6,800 and I think 7K on FanDuel. Talk to me about this Orlando team. Is there anyone we can go to in confidence? Even a Cole Anthony coming in at 5,300 with that type of ownership, I was like, that's a lot for Cole Anthony with everyone back on the table, but it's a very favorable price.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Anthony here because, like on FanDuel, it's just an insane price tag. You're
Mhm.
still talking about probably 32 minutes or so. Anthony has struggled from the field since coming back from his ankle injury. He has like a 42% true shooting percentage since returning on January 5th. He's still averaged about a fantasy point per minute. So you're talking about a guy shooting 10 points lower than his season average in terms of true shooting that is still averaging a fantasy point per minute and likely to play 32 minutes or so at 5,300. That's just a fantastic spot to get to. On DraftKings at 6,700, same kind of thing. Like he's still, you know, back like back of the napkin math projects for 5.5 times his salary or so, and as soon as like you're expecting him to shoot better sooner than later. So he just looks really good to me. I'm really interested in Bamba because this is a slate where there is a lot of opportunity cost at center, but Bamba's the kind of guy where he at least gives you a really high ceiling. He has a lot of volatility in his game. He has plenty of defensive stat upside, which is nice. Right now, we only have him projected for 2.5% ownership on DraftKings with a 7% chance of being in the optimal lineup. He made it into my DraftKings tournament and plays video earlier just because I think what you're going to see happen on this slate is that a lot of ownership is going to go a little bit cheaper to Steven Adams, Rashawn Holmes, guys in that price range. And then you're probably going to see some people go to Bismack Biyombo at the same price point as Bamba. You're going to see some ownership go to Whiteside for a little bit more. But Bamba can just beat all of those guys. Like he has that kind of upside. And he's not, even though he's more expensive than the Adams and Holmes tier, it's not by a lot. Like you can basically just sacrifice make a mild sacrifice somewhere else. So if Bamba were to beat those guys by say 10 to 12 points, I think it's pretty safe to say that you would rather have Bamba than them, even though they're cheaper. So I am really interested in Bamba in tournaments.
Yeah, I think he's in pretty awesome. He's like the true definition of a tournament play on a 10 game slate. The upside's there and the floor is also there. So tournament play definitely can work out for you. Outside on FanDuel, I mean, I think you can definitely take your chances on a $5,600 Bamba for sure. Cole Anthony's insanely priced for sure. In our sponsor Price Picks, Cole Anthony's has a prop total points prop line of 13.5. We are projecting him for 17 points on in this game, an expected win percentage of 70%. So Cole Anthony is I think a priority price pick play over there. So make sure to check out our sponsor Price Picks. And also, please do hit the like button for us. It's really fun to get to do a show with Adam. So it's a ton of fun. Hit the like button. That support goes a long way for us. But on to the Knicks taking on the Heat. I believe all the 90s NBA fans are very thrilled to see this. But taking on the Knicks, Knicks come in with I believe a very low team total. It's changed over throughout the day, but the total only comes in at I have the total right now at 204 points in the game in this game. So probably the lowest total on the slate. Yes, it is the lowest total. But there are guys who have upside to get 40, 50 fantasy points. On the Knicks side, it'd be Julius Randle, who has been fallen down to earth quite a bit. $9,500 over there for Julius Randle. I'm not that interested in going to Julius Randle. Everyone on this Knicks team, it's tough to pinpoint what the rotation is going to look like. They traded for Cam Reddish. They said they were going to play him. He plays 5 minutes. I want to stay away from this Knicks team. How about you, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, on DraftKings, I think this is actively like a horrible team to get to. If you get to a little bit of Julius Randle, sure, whatever, but Barrett, Robinson, Kemba, Fournier, like these guys are all so expensive for their likely role. It's just really difficult. And on top of that, this is not an appealing game. You have two extremely slow teams, two teams that play well defensively. The Knicks have a 99 implied total. It's just really tough for me to single out anything. If you wanted to get to an $8,600 Randall on FanDuel, that is someone that showed up in my tournaments play video earlier. Not that I like the spot or anything. It's just that he wasn't getting much ownership and he's pretty cheap and the minutes will still be there. But just really brutal game. And in particular, the Knicks rotation on top of it being a really unappealing game is tough to get to.
I agree. And I have it's a game where it's kind of gross across the board, a lot of uncertainty. And the thing is, they just traded for this guy. They publicly made claims that they were going to play him more, and he just didn't play. So I know he's coming back from some sort of injury. It's not a great matchup, but I have no really interest in the Knicks. And the only guy who I'm willing to sprinkle in a little bit, not even aggressively, just even to come in slightly with the field, maybe a little bit under, is Randall just because of the upside. No one really else sticks out to me. I mean, some cheap price guys on Yahoo, maybe a Fournier. He has these weird games where he just pops off. So outside of that, I have no real thoughts on the Knicks. Are you good to go on to Miami?
Yep.
All right. On to the Heat side we go. This Heat team still playing without no Kyle Lowry. Fun fact, Victor Oladipo was seen to practice. He might return after the post-All-Star break. So just adding another body to that team is going to be frustrating. He just hasn't played healthy, 5 games healthy. It feels like in 3-4 years now. But Jimmy Butler, $8,500, $8,700 on DraftKings and FanDuel, $43 on Yahoo. Jimmy Butler is someone who I think I'll be willing to take my chances on getting over the field on. I know he's priced a little cheap. He's around usually in the mid-nines K range of late, but just this year just had to deal with some injuries. But he's came back, and I don't mind going to Butler at all. There's still no Kyle Lowry. Potential sister can boost up for him. Other guys who I think you can go to on this team in some sort of upside option, Bam Adebayo, FanDuel, where you get power forward and center eligibility, grades out to be a pretty solid play. Who are you targeting on this Miami Heat team? Is there someone who's coming in under-owned that we should be looking at?
I'm with you on Butler. I still hate this game, but his salary is very reasonable. He's only 8,500 on DraftKings. We have 5 games this year where Lowry's been out and both of Adebayo and Butler have been in. Butler's played a total of 167 minutes, 25.5% usage rate, 37.5% assist percentage. I expect the ball to be in his hands a lot. He's averaged 1.21 DraftKings points per minute. So really don't mind that $8,500 price tag on DraftKings. I think you can look to Bam at 7,700. That's fine. Plenty of options at center. And then one spot in tournaments that I am interested in is Tyler Hero. 6,600 on DraftKings, currently projected for about 1% ownership, 6% chance of being in the optimal lineup. So not someone that's super likely to get there, but you can expect 32, 33 minutes from Hero as long as we don't hear that he's severely limited or anything. He's only played 2 games this year without Lowry and with the other 2, but he does have a 31% usage rate in those games. So while I think that you're going to see Butler dominate assists and you're basically going to see Hero be a scoring dependent player, he is someone that when his shot's falling, he will keep chucking, and he does give you a pretty nice ceiling at that price.
Yeah, I like targeting Tyler Hero as well, both on DraftKings and FanDuel. I don't mind getting above the field on a guy like him. A great tournament option, in my opinion. We got word that Gordon Hayward has entered health and safety protocols. Quick 2 cents of him being out. It's similar to what we just saw the other last night. I don't expect PJ Washington to get ejected, but any quick thoughts on Gordon Hayward entering health and safety protocols?
The only secondary thought I have, because we already kind of talked about that rotation. Now you're just going to want to keep an eye on more news, because a lot of times when you get one in health and safety protocols, you get a couple others following them. So there's some chance that we're talking about a really shorthanded Charlotte team by the end of the show, I guess.
And if anyone was concerned about the Magic starting lineup, we got Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs, Franz Wagner, and they're doing the Twin Towers still, Wendell Carter and Mo Bamba starting 5. So I'm good to go on to the next game. And a very devastated Kings loss the other night. Sacramento takes on Atlanta. Sacramento and Atlanta's team total comes in at 230.5. Atlanta's favored by 7.5. Yesterday, we saw Terrence Davis, I believe, split his head, if I'm not mistaken, or
so banged his head on the floor and hurt his wrist in doing so.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, my gut tells me he's not going to play, but keep an eye on.
He's already out.
Oh, he's already out. Okay. So I must have completely. Yep. He is out. My apologies there. But Now looking at this team with De'Aaron Fox, Tyrese Halliburton, Harrison Barnes, Rashawn Holmes. A lot of these guys are priced like favorably outside of Tyrese Halliburton, whose price has gone up, but he's been producing in the recent run of minutes he's got when some of these guys have been out. I like going to a potentially a Rashawn Holmes at 4,500, coming in with some ownership on DraftKings, power forward center on FanDuel, priced up at 5,900. So not as appealing, but I like the game environment in this game. I like the back and forth. Holmes definitely stands out to me on DraftKings as a favorite, like a very good value Kings play. In terms of raw points, De'Aaron Fox can get there, but he just hasn't done it all year long. I mean, he just seems disinterested to be with this Kings team. I don't expect De'Aaron Fox to be a King post NBA trade deadline, but talk to me about this Kings team.
Yeah, so for one, I think the pricing is pretty different between FanDuel and DraftKings. On FanDuel, you have some really favorable pricing where guys like Buddy Hield look pretty good. Hield's 5,200. He's likely to play more minutes tonight with Terrence Davis out. I think he looks good on FanDuel. On DraftKings, he kind of just looks like a tournament only guy to me, where like he is going to get more minutes, or you would assume he's going to get more minutes. He's certainly capable of getting hot and taking more shots, but $6,400 is a price tag where, like, in his normal role, you just don't even consider the guys. So now when you get him in an elevated role, he's still just kind of, I think, correctly priced. Rashawn Holmes, though, at 4,500 on DraftKings does stand out. He played about 23 minutes last night, but didn't play it all in the fourth because they got absolutely destroyed by the Celtics. I think that if this game is competitive, you're likely to see 26 to 28 minutes from Holmes. He's a good point per minute guy. 4,500 is a very reasonable price tag. De'Aaron Fox at 8,200, like kind of like you were saying, he certainly gives you a ceiling. He can go have a good game, but for example, I would just much rather go to like Karis LeVert for $400 more. Where I think the backcourt does get interesting is if Fox sits, Tyrese Halliburton has a 40% assist percentage without De'Aaron Fox on the floor this year. You would get, or you would expect, elevated production from him. And then also you have a $4,400 Davion Mitchell, who, while he's not a great point per minute guy, he's only at 0.79 DraftKings points per minute without Fox on the floor this year. When you take out Fox and you take out Davis, and you might not have Chimezie Metu, which would mean that you're probably getting more Harrison Barnes at the 4, and as a result, there's more backcourt minutes available. Looking to guys like Mitchell and Halliburton becomes pretty appealing. Halliburton in particular.
Yeah, and I think that's some pretty important news there. Buddy Hield 5,200. I don't mind sprinkling in some of him. It's Holmes is definitely stands out to me on DraftKings. Keep an eye on the news there. I mean, especially with De'Aaron Fox. I mean, Halliburton will jump up quite a bit, and I don't mind sprinkling in some Davion Mitchell in terms of value. But he, like you said, he's not the greatest fantasy player. It seems like a good real life NBA defender at some point in his career, but in terms of fantasy wise, not just yet. Onto the Atlanta side we go. Appealing spot. We just saw what the Boston team did to this Kings team the other night. Not to say like Atlanta's going to do the same thing, but looking to these guys, Bogdanovich is going to return on some sort of minutes limit tonight. So another body will be there. I think DeAndre Hunter is set to return as well. So this team is not as appealing as they're no longer shorthanded. Everyone is back. I think McMillan said Bogdanovich is going to play between 20 and 24 minutes. And with everyone coming back, and certainly there's the good game environment for someone to spike an upside here. I mean, Trae Young will stick out to me just because of the pure volume there, but just guys coming back, everyone's just priced too expensive, and the minutes will kind of fluctuate with everyone coming back. How do we handle this Atlanta Hawks situation tonight?
I think it's really difficult to prioritize anything because it is a really good matchup against the Kings, and you certainly do get a high ceiling, but this is a team where I think it's just, and you see this reflected in the boom bust tool for several different players, you have guys going under-owned relative to their chances of success, but their chances of success are still so low compared to some alternatives on the slate that it's tough to say, like, oh, the edge on this slate is just jamming in Trae Young or Clint Capella or John Collins. You know, they all are projected to go somewhat under-owned. We have Young at 9% ownership with a 10% chance of being optimal, Capella at 2% ownership with a 4% chance, Collins at 3% with a 6% chance. They're all guys that when typically when you see something like that in the boom bust tool, they're guys that I end up mixing into some lineups, maybe even being a little bit over the field on, but mixing in the lineups where I have more popular plays and I need a high upside guy at low ownership. But they're not guys that I typically end up saying, like, oh, well, I'm just going to play 40% Clint Capella tonight. And if he happens to score 60, I'm in a good spot because he's just not that likely to succeed relative to, the other options at his position. So I basically just see Young, Capella, Collins as guys that you mix into otherwise popular lineups and hope for the best, but not guys that I expect to have tons of exposure to.
Yeah, and I think these guys from the Hawks team are great, like guys to sprinkle in. No one to aggressively target. If you land on them, great. If you don't, I don't think you're missing out on much type of situation. So yeah, it's a great game environment, and there's some news on the Kings side that could definitely open things up a bit more. But monitor the news situation there. Great game environment. On to the Denver and Brooklyn Nets game we go. Denver in Brooklyn, and that means no Kyrie Irving for the Brooklyn Nets. But this is another appealing game in terms of fantasy wise because they're the studs of the games in guys like Jokic and Harden. Brooklyn's favored by a 1.5, 221.5 total. That checks in last I checked. But let's talk about the Denver side of things. Will Barton and Nikola Jokic, Aaron Gordon, kind of like their big three. We saw them handle the Detroit team pretty handily the other night. Jokic 12-4, Jokic 11-8, 57 on Yahoo. And he's been great. I mean, and shockingly enough, he was not the best center yesterday, as Joel Embiid is just making a case for the pre-All-Star MVP yet again. But talk to me, Nikola Jokic, and a nice Brooklyn matchup. And Nikola Jokic just smashed the slate tonight.
Yeah, I mean, he's still the top projected guy on the slate. He's also more expensive than everyone else. One thing that you do want to pay attention to, at least to some extent, is the status of Will Barton, because one way or the other, Jokic looks great. He's like a 1.75 DraftKings point per minute guy overall this season, but he gets up to 1.85 to 1.95 DraftKings points per minute when he plays without Barton or Michael Porter Jr. Obviously, Porter Jr. is not playing tonight. So you do get a bump there, and that is an important thing to pay attention to because you have Harden for less playing without Kyrie and without Durant. You also have Jokic at this position that has such a high opportunity cost. It's going to you're going to be able to build lineups that just typically, I think, look a little bit better if you go to cheaper centers and then pay up for Harden at point guard as opposed to vice versa. But at the same time, there are some other good point guard options as well. So you do want to pay attention to the ownership. Like last night in lower stakes, you had actually, I guess in both lower stakes and higher stakes, you had like 2-1 going to Harden versus Jokic. It's just that in higher stakes, both players were higher owned than they were in lower stakes. So, I think that you can't go wrong by playing someone that has a very good chance of scoring 70 fantasy points here. It's just that it does come down to, trying to give yourself the best chance of success. And from a positional standpoint, you are paying a bit of a premium on Jokic compared to somebody like Harden.
Yeah, for example, no two slates are the same. Yesterday's slate, it was pretty damn easy to jam in all the studs you wanted, along with the Raptors and Pelicans value. Today, not so much. And at this moment, it could definitely change within the next 30 minutes. It's a bit harder to jam in a 12-4 Jokic, and it's a back-to-back. And some reasons of that, Jokic, he's expensive, and you really need him to demolish that price tag. And everyone else on your team has to do well. And by playing a guy like 12-4 Jokic, you're going to be playing some very uncertain value, a lot more uncertain than it was yesterday. So keep an eye on that situation. And yeah, Jokic has the upside, but it's just doesn't seem like as great of a play as he was yesterday just because of how great the value was just to lock in those raw points. Aaron Gordon's been finally playing like the best basketball he has as a Denver Nugget. I hope he gets like one of the all NBA defensive nominations, but he's playing well on the offensive end now. But guys coming back, like Barton's going to be there to definitely steal some shot attempts and usage away from him. On the Denver side of things, it's just Jokic, and I don't really have any interest there. Monty Morris is getting some ownership, but I really don't want to go there. Go ahead.
I'll say, I am interested in Morris if Barton's out. He's actually averaged about a fantasy point per minute in the games that Barton has missed and Jokic has been in. You're only talking 6 games, but you do get just a little bit more upside for Monte Morris at a pretty cheap price tag. Gordon's pretty expensive. And then one thing that I know yesterday people were asking about, and we kind of got it answered, with Bryn Forbes in this rotation, you still didn't really see any of these backups become viable options without Barton. You got Rivers moving into the starting lineup and playing 26 to 28 minutes, but still Austin Rivers. That's not that exciting. But somebody like Bones Highland, who we would have looked to earlier in the year, played like 8 to 10 minutes off the bench after being a DNP last game. Nobody off the bench yesterday played more than 19 minutes. So even if Barton is out, I think you're still pretty much just keeping it to Jokic as the priority, some Monte Morris. If you get to some very low-owned Aaron Gordon, then fine. But I think it's pretty much Jokic, clear number one, Morris number two, and then not really caring about the rest of this team.
Yeah, and it's the other side of it. I mean, yeah, like I think you nailed it. There's not really much to touch on, just like new body being there. Another guy who, and also we've seen Boogie Cousins just steal all the usage off the second unit, turns over the ball every other play last night. I was just interested to see how he's going to fit in the second unit. I mean, he's Mike Malone's boy, so he's probably get another 10-day there. But onto the Brooklyn Nets we go. James Harden, 11-5, 10-2. God damn, he's 10-2 on FanDuel. He's like an absolute great play over there. The ownership comes in at north of 40% last time I pulled everything. 24.8%. On our show, The Deeper Dive, I mean, we got like 2,000 people watching. Hit the like button, everyone. A lot of people build one lineup on their respective sites. If I was building one lineup today on FanDuel, it is tough for me not to have James Harden in there. How do you feel about going if you were building one lineup with a guy like James Harden on DraftKings?
I feel very good about it. The ownership's going to be there, but there are 9 other games on the slate. You can find pretty easy ways to differentiate elsewhere in your lineup. And Harden is just still like, you're getting basically $1,000 discount off of Jokic. He's averaged about 1.6 DraftKings points per minute without Kyrie and Durant this year. You're likely to get 38 to 40 minutes from him, which is a huge deal because from a point per minute standpoint, he's still behind guys like Giannis and Jokic, but he's likely to play 4 to 6 minutes more than Jokic. He's likely to play like 6+ minutes more than Giannis. So it just makes him project as I think the second highest guy on the slate behind Jokic, and he's available at a discount. So even though he will be really popular, it's still not really a spot that I'm looking at and trying to get away from all that frequently.
Yeah, he just grades out as a great play. If I were to have any concern, they might throw some Aaron Gordon at him, but it's James Harden. He's matchup proof as it gets. 11-5, 10-2. There's not the greatest value to gem in multiple studs like there was yesterday, but if there was a stud to go to, it's definitely James Harden. Now, this team is still shorthanded when there's no Kyrie Irving. We've been seeing LaMarcus Aldridge get a decent amount of usage when he's on the court. He comes in at 5,700, 5,300 on FanDuel and DraftKings. Is there a second Brooklyn net that we can go in any sort of confidence? Is it a Patty Mills? Is it a Kessler Edwards? These like third-tier Brooklyn Nets guys just piss me off because Steve Nash, I have no idea what he's going to do on a night-in, night-out basis. But one of these guys happen to pop off every game, and I'm always on the wrong guy.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to pick a second guy, Patty Mills with point guard and small forward eligibility on DraftKings, $4,900. He only played about 30 minutes last night, but he's averaged about 34 minutes per game in the games he's played with Harden and without the other two main pieces. He's around a 0.85 fantasy point per minute guy. Kind of just a decent value option where as other stuff opens up, he'll kind of fall off the board because he's not that exciting. But as things stand right now, I think he looks okay. You can certainly say the same thing about Edwards. He should give you 32 to 34 minutes. Production will vary, but pretty cheap. One thing to point out, though, that is different than last night is that Nick Claxton is out. So last night you got basically the Steve Nash version of a Washington Wizards front court rotation where none of the centers played remotely enough to be usable in DFS. Taking Claxton out, you should just get back to most likely like a 20 to 22 minute, they're on sharp, 26 or so minute LaMarcus Aldridge split. I know recently you had the 19-minute game from Aldridge even before Claxton came back, but that was a game where he dealt with some fouls as well, and Blake Griffin subbed in and took like 6 minutes. So I don't hate throwing, like just trying to get, a upside game from either of those guys. The problem is just that like Rashawn Holmes is still a higher probability play. Steven Adams is still a higher probability play. Bamba, like you still have a lot of competition just even in this price range.
Yeah, and I think you bring up excellent points there. James Harden is $49 on Yahoo with Patty Mills priced very favorably at $14 as well. If you guys are looking to find a way to get Harden in there, I don't mind if you have Mills with him, even on a 10-game slate. But Yeah, this is definitely, I think, potentially an NBA Finals preview, as crazy as that sounds. If these guys are all healthy, that means including Jamal Murray around April or May, if that can definitely happen for him. But this is going to be a very popular game to just target amongst the studs, and especially James Harden. It's tough to move off of him. On another interesting game, we go. Toronto takes on the Bulls. We are dealing with this Raptors team where they were kind of the core of the slate. If you did not play a Raptor yesterday, you probably took a fat L because you probably needed two or three, along with two or three Pelicans, and mix and match Anthony Edwards into the rest of the studs. You probably won a lot of money. But looking at these guys priced up, Van Vliet $8,700, $8,500. With him expected to return today, this Toronto team does not seem as appealing as yesterday. They're all coming in pretty low owned. But the one thing that goes for them is the tight rotation Nick Nurse runs. He just doesn't give a damn. He's just going to run his 8 guys and run them into the ground. So kind of a Thibodeau 2.0 in a weird way with the tight rotations we've seen from Nick Nurse. But I have some interest in going to these guys, even though they're getting everyone back, and potentially Scotty Barnes as well. I like sprinkling in some of these guys, kind of actually going a little bit aggressively over the field on this Raptors team. How do you feel about them?
Yeah, I agree. Like the way I see it is we don't know if Van Vliet's going to be in. We don't know if Barnes is going to be in. But Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, Gary Trent, they're going to look like pretty good options even if both of those guys are in. And they look even better if one or both are out because at the very least they play more minutes. You talk about somebody like Siakam, he's 8,900 with power forward eligibility on DraftKings. Even if Van Vliet plays, he looks pretty good just because he's still going to play like 38 minutes. But if Van Vliet is out, Siakam's assist percentage jumps to like 30%, and he's probably going to play like 42 minutes. So he looks even better. If Van Vliet is in, I like the $8,700 price tag. The issue that you run into is that you do, in addition to Harden, we haven't talked yet about John Morant or DeJounte Murray at point guard, but you have those guys for like $1,000 or so more than Van Vliet, but still someone that can get very, very hot and is likely to play 40 minutes or so. Gary Trent at 5K is, I think, pretty underpriced. And then you get like the pieces that I think go from being not really useful to interesting, depending on news, are Achua and Boucher, where if one of Barnes or Van Vliet is out, I expect that Achua will start. He only played about 24 minutes yesterday, but prior to that, he had been averaging about 35 minutes per game in his starts. I think that there's still a decent chance, at least, that you're getting around 30 minutes at 3,800. If they're both out, you're probably getting 30 plus minutes from Boucher as well. So I really want to get to whoever is starting for Toronto. We just, outside of Siakam, Anunoby, and Trent, don't know for sure who that is yet.
Yeah, and it's really important news on the slate because the way the timing works out, yesterday we got it early. Today we're going to get it much later. So definitely a little bit of game theory involved in how to handle this situation. And it could definitely pan out and pay off for guys. And if these guys are going to miss both those guys are going to be out again. It's Raptors galore yet again. But I still like them regardless of being in or being out type of situation. But yeah, you nailed it. I have really not much to go there, and keeping an eye on the news there will definitely change how to approach the Raptors. But on to the Chicago side of things, we got the return of Zach LaVine in limited fashion against an OKC team. DeMar DeRozan did not play against OKC. I expect him to play today. DeRozan, Vooch, LaVine, their big three. And the guy who's been pissing me off late, and just is, I just don't think he's as good as he's been playing. He's playing way over his head is Ayo Dosunmu. But with everyone back, I won't be going to him. But I do think targeting a DeRozan, $8,200 seems the way to go. He's my favorite bull to go to on DraftKings. The field also feels the same way. And I like going to LaVine a lot on FanDuel at that $7,500 price tag. Kind of just picking and choosing these guys by sight seems the way to go, as they're priced kind of differently on both sites.
Yeah, agreed. DeRozan's the one that really stands out to me regardless. He's 9K on FanDuel. He's, I believe, 8,200 on DraftKings. He missed the last game for rest. I don't think there's any reason to think he's not giving you 36 minutes or so here. He's averaged well over fantasy point per minute this year. So he looks really good. If you get to some Vooch, you get to some LaVine, that's fine. I'm with you on the Sunmu. He keeps putting up big numbers. Maybe he's never going to stop. I don't know. Could just turn into like a bubble TJ Warren situation where I just lose every time he
That's
plays.
giving him
But
way too much praise. That's giving him way
yeah.
too much praise. Let's show him that.
But as these guys come back, I just have a hard time getting to him at this salary. But DeRozan to me really stands out as a very good option.
Yeah, I'm not playing Io DeSumo, no chance. I'd rather play Kobe White than Io DeSumo, but that's looking at if you want to play Vooch, I recommend going to him on Yahoo, only $36 there. So this is another team where kind of concentrated usage when all these guys are back. So you can kind of pinpoint your spots here. And like you said, DeRozan stands out quite a bit. Kind of annoying. He's power forward only on DraftKings, which it's kind of probably the reason why his ownership's coming a bit lower than it usually would be if he had a multi-position eligibility there. But any final thoughts on this game?
Nope.
All right, everyone hit the like button for us. And if you're just tuning in, make sure to check out our sponsors, PrizePicks. Use the promo code Awesemo. You get a deposit bonus match up to $100. And more importantly, check out our free PrizePicks tool, as that has been printing money for many people, as I've seen around on social. So on to the next game we go. Memphis takes on San Antonio. Memphis is favored by 3.5, 220.5 total for this game. I expect Desmond Bane to return for this Memphis team last I checked. So with Desmond Bane returning, he is obviously going to take away a rotational run from what we saw from this depleted team earlier over the past week and a half. But John Moran still leads the show, 9,900. Jaren Jackson now priced up at 7,800. It's finally seemed like he put on a string of good games. Only comes in at $6,600 on DraftKings. I like going to Jaren Jackson a decent amount on DK, but everyone else seems priced appropriately just because Desmond Bane being back, kind of all hands on deck situation where John Moran is not as appealing as he once was. There are a lot of guys who are priced cheaper than him that just project better and just grade out better than John Moran, especially for tonight.
I think I'm higher on Morant. Brooks is still out. You're still looking at like a 34% usage rate, 36% assist percentage from Morant. Also a good chance he plays more minutes still with Tyus Jones sideline. So I still really like getting him at 9,900. Fast-paced San Antonio team, 117 implied total for Memphis. I still love John Morant. I think he's a great play tonight. Bane coming back cuts into a lot of the peripheral guys that we were going to before, like Conchar, like Williams, like Melton, but I don't really expect him to impact Morant too much, so I still really like him. Jaren Jackson to me still looks very good. You should see elevated usage from him with Brooks still sidelined. 6,600 in particular is a reasonable price tag. And then Steven Adams, like he's not the most exciting player, but he's 4,500. He's probably playing 26 to 28 minutes here. Just looks like a pretty good value. If Brandon Clark does miss this game, you potentially get a few more minutes for Adams as well, since Clark does play a decent amount of backup center. I think it would also be a benefit for Jackson since he is more productive when he plays center. But to me, Adams is a good value. Morant is probably my favorite play for Memphis. And then Jackson, I think, looks pretty good as well.
Yeah, and maybe I came off a little bit bearish on John Morant. I just think there are other guys I prefer around him. So maybe we defer on that, and it's about time we kind of differed. We've been on the same page pretty much.
I think the last time we did a show, that was like the one spot we were different too.
And yeah, John Moran, I believe, dropped like 65. So I just I'm always never extremely high on John Morant. When he's like nearing the 10K price range, I just shy away. It's kind of like the personal bias I have. But
I think John Morant's like baseline should be 10K.
Okay. I think he's like a 9K player. That's how I guess that's where we differ. But he's obviously an outstanding player. And I do think you bring up a good point with Tyus Jones not there. The minutes are definitely sprinkling his way. I have no other thoughts on this Memphis team. You nailed it across the board. Jaren Jackson, probably my favorite Memphis player to go on DK, while on FanDuel, I think I don't mind going to John Morant if I were to roster a Memphis guy at $9,900 there. Everyone else on the team seems priced a little too expensive. But onto the San Antonio side we go. DeJounte Murray continues to ball out. He got pretty much his rotation snapped as they were just waxing the Rockets last night. DeJounte Murray, $9,800 on DraftKings. He comes in at, I believe, 10-3 on FanDuel. Pretty expensive, more expensive than Harden, $4,700 on Yahoo. DeJounte Murray kind of just like the class of the Spurs. Derek White also being back in the picture at sub 6K. He's an option to go to. And Jakob Poeltl is a center option that I do think will have a decent amount of ownership on DraftKings tonight. How do we handle the Spurs big three? And is this Jakob Poeltl ownership kind of a trap?
I think the Spurs are one of the most appealing teams top to bottom on DraftKings tonight. They're just kind of all underpriced across the board. Like you start at Murray at 9,800. Like, yeah, it's a healthy price tag, but you're talking about a 1.4 fantasy point per minute guy that's likely to play 36 minutes or so. Just makes him look pretty good. Derek White's about a fantasy point per minute guy that's likely to give you 32 minutes. Pirtle, I think, is probably the most interesting one to talk about because I think he's a very good play at 6,200. You've seen, like, typically he's playing 32 minutes or so in competitive games, but also you've seen Pop just really not care about the backup centers, which I just always like when you're talking about a starting center, because if Pop really liked Jock Landale or Pop really liked Drew Eubanks, it would make me a little bit more hesitant to go to Pirtle because if Pop's going to say, I want this guy to play 16 to 18 minutes, then Pirtle's only playing 30 to 32. But like 2 games ago, their last competitive game, you saw Pop basically play one guy for like, a few minutes in the first half, one guy for a few minutes in the second half. It kind of tells me that Pirtle is the center, and the only reason anybody else is playing center is when Pirtle needs to take a break. So that is something that's really appealing to me from, just like a minutes upside standpoint. Where I think the conversation gets interesting, and I think you were kind of alluding to it too, when I like Pirtle's projected for 24% ownership. I get it. I think that's fine. I think he's a very good play at 6,200. Where I question it is we haven't gotten to that game yet. But for example, Hassan Whiteside's getting like 40% of the ownership that Pirtle is. Whiteside's at 10%, Pirtle's at 24%. I think they're a lot closer than that. I think that there are other center options that are getting less ownership as well. So this just kind of strikes me as one of those situations that we've seen a lot this year where I think it's likely that Pirtle pulls more ownership than he should relative to his chances of success compared to the alternatives. You've kind of just seen that's been one thing you've seen like all season long in NBA DFS and really most DFS sports these days is that like the best projected players just get like massive amounts of ownership, even though realistically the range of outcomes is the same as several other players. So that is the one thing I'd be cautious of with Pirtle. But again, I'm not trying to talk anyone off of it. You want to be aware that Pirtle is probably going to pull more ownership. So in your Pirtle lineups, you probably want to be taking more of those like John Collins type plays where, they're low probability, but still high ceilings, but, really low owned, just to, offset that ownership.
Yeah, I think you bring up an excellent point there. And I've kind of been noticing that everyone's more in a more data-driven process of late, especially over years. Every year, if you look back at it, people are just more like making decisions based off data than just looking at box scores. And it's kind of the evolution of DFS that we're dealing with, mainly part to Awesemo.com. I mean, we've made a lot of better players over the years so far, but it's a very appealing game in terms of fantasy-wise, and especially on the Spurs side of things. I have no interest if you land on multiple guys from this team. I prefer the Spurs a lot more than I do the Memphis side in terms of just fantasy-wise and targeting, especially where their prices have been priced out at this moment. And a guy like you touched on, Derek White, I don't have any issues going to him. I know he's just coming back, and his rotations have kind of been out of whack since he's been back. But the Spurs side is definitely the team I'll be trying to target later in the night as well. Now, everyone hit the like button. If we can get this up to 500-600 likes before a lock and doing all the work for them, that'd be fantastic. And before we hand this off to Greg and Eric, we have 15 minutes to go. On to the next game we go. You preluded Hassan Whiteside. Phoenix takes on Utah. Phoenix is 4.5-point favorites, 223.5 Vegas total. The Phoenix team is a team that obviously this matchup just happened the other night. I think we can definitely target Phoenix yet again. Especially what I've noticed is with campaign not being there, we've seen Chris Paul get an extra bit of minutes, like 2-3 extra minutes over the past few games. Devin Booker priced all the way up at 9,700. Raw points wise seems fine to go to, but value wise not so great. These guys are priced up now. I think Bismack Biyombo should be tested for PEDs, but God, he just pisses me off at this moment. How do we attack Phoenix tonight? They have the potential to break slate, but I just can't go to a Bismack Biyombo. He's just pissing me off. But can we go to a Chris Paul and Devin Booker at these elevated price tags when we've touched on some great plays around them?
Yeah, so like I view Paul and Booker sort of in like the John Collins vein. Like they're likely to succeed probably a little bit more, but they're not like I would rather play DeJounte Murray for $100 more than Devin Booker. I'd rather play Morant for $200 more. Booker's also you're basically just getting like 4 to 5 to 1 odds by taking Booker. So if you need, if you are playing like Jakob Poeltl and some other popular guys, by all means, go to Devin Booker, go to Chris Paul. They have very high ceilings. They're capable of going for 50 plus. But there are guys that I expect to just have more of because they look a little bit better. The Biyombo piece is really interesting to me. I don't totally buy into what he's doing because we have such a large sample of Bismack Biyombo being like a decent but not great fantasy guy. And then this year he's at 1.2 DraftKings points per minute. Greg attributed a lot of that to Chris Paul, and I am fine at least giving some credit to Chris Paul. I still have a hard time saying that like Chris Paul's turning Bismack Biyombo into a 1.2 fantasy point per minute guy. But I also think at 5,500, assuming you're going to get 30 to 32 minutes, he looks fine. 24% ownership though, like again, I think I would just rather go to like a Mo Bamba type guy for like if you're going to lay me 10 to 1 and you get Bismack Biyombo and I get Mo Bamba, I'm taking Mo Bamba every time. So like that's kind of where it is. Like I think Biyombo's fine, but I don't really love the ownership there. One way that I do think is really interesting to counteract that ownership, and because a lot of times in NBA DFS, it's tough to really like put yourself in a position to leapfrog the field. Jalen Smith is getting 2% ownership right now at 3,600 with power forward eligibility. We know how deep the center position is today. It's not going to work out all that often because clearly the Suns don't give a shit about Jalen Smith. Like they just kicked him out of the rotation for Biyombo. But with JaVale McGee out tonight, I think the normal rotation is 32 minutes or so for Biyombo, 16 for Smith. Any sort of foul trouble or whatever for Biyombo should mean a direct, like, fewer minutes for Biyombo, more for Smith. So if you were to just somehow, any reason, it doesn't matter, get a situation where Biyombo plays 25 or 26 minutes and Smith plays 22 or 23, you are going to have some really good lineups with Jalen Smith at power forward and then 2 other high upside centers in place of Biyombo. So again, not something that I expect to succeed all that often, but when it does, I think it pays out really, really well. That is one way you can kind of counteract that Biyombo ownership. Cameron Johnson getting the most ownership on this team, I think a phenomenal value, particularly on DraftKings at only 4,300, should play 36 minutes or so.
Yeah, there are times where Monty Williams has rolled out Cam Johnson at the 5. That's how much they don't like Jalen Smith. So another boost for Cam Johnson at that price tag. He's even in play at 5K over there on FanDuel. Not so bad there.
Do you think that Smith is the backup center tonight?
Do I think he's the direct? Yeah, I think he plays, barring foul trouble, I think he gets to run 16 to 18 minutes. He just has to.
Yeah. We're in the same boat. Like, I think Cameron Johnson is the answer to, like, when we do the show tomorrow and it's like, damn, why did Jalen Smith not play?
Why I think they could run Cam Johnson at the 5 and instead of 16 to 18, we might see a 10 to 12 Jalen Smith rotation is because Utah can go small as well, and they can just run Rudy Gay at the 5, and it's fine. It's like they can definitely match up just fine without having the bigs go at it.
The biggest reason that I feel relatively confident in Jalen Smith is that Phoenix is missing Crowder as well. Like Phoenix is shorthanded elsewhere, so if you're giving center minutes to Cameron Johnson, you're just giving more minutes to like Landry Shamet, Elfrid Payton, Ish Wainwright. Maybe they do, but like I don't really know that they would rather play Payton or Wainwright over Jalen Smith. I think it might just finally be to the point where the Suns are out of guys that they want to play. But I do agree. Like the answer to if Jalen Smith were to not play, the answer to that is for sure that Cameron Johnson was the backup center.
Yeah, Bismack Biyombo, he was, I believe, like a lottery pick. I think by the Bobcats when they were still like named the Bobcats. But did you know he's only 29?
Biyombo?
Yeah.
I would have guessed he was like 35.
Yeah, Biyombo's only 29 years old. I knew he was always like, he was like very short because he's only 6'8" and has a wingspan of 7'6". And I was like, I looked this up recently. I was like, I thought Biyombo was a little bit taller than that. He just plays big, and I it's just pissing me off how well he's been playing, and I've been on the wrong side of it each and every game. Yeah. And now it's just forcing my hand to like deal with this again today at the worst situation.
One thing to mention, just because I've seen it come up a couple of times in chat, that Smith barely played yesterday or hasn't been playing. Yeah, that's all true. JaVale McGee's out tonight. So
that's like
just an example. Like very clearly, they don't care about playing Jalen Smith. He's been out of the rotation. Like you guys are right, but when you take JaVale McGee out, that makes a big difference. So you can't just look at yesterday.
Yeah. On to the last game we go. We got 7 minutes to go. Hit the like button, everyone. I did much better time this time around than last Wednesday as we had 13 games. But any final – so we got to talk about Utah. But the Utah side of things, they're still shorthanded a little bit, but they got some guys back. I think Mike Conley is going to return today. But we still have to deal with the conundrum of Hassan Whiteside. He's just also been a pain in the ass as well, as he projects great and then he just doesn't perform all that well. $5,500 on FanDuel. Price up now at $6,600 on DraftKings. The ownership is still kind of there, but not as much. But how do we target this Utah team? Mike Conley being back there, we don't have to deal with their G Leaguers as much as we did the other night. I like targeting going to guys like Clarkson yet again. Not as much on $7,400, $5,600 FanDuel price tag is where I would want to go to Clarkson. Outside of Clarkson and Conley on FanDuel, they're just priced so much better on FanDuel. How do we attack this Utah team on DraftKings?
Yeah, I think on FanDuel, you want to be getting to a good amount of these guys. On DraftKings, I think it's a lot more difficult. Like you still get, Bogdanovich has about a 29% usage rate without Mitchell, but he's priced for that. Clarkson, same kind of thing, should play around 30 minutes, but he's like a point per minute guy. He's 7,400. You need a really, really good game from him there. The only guy to me on DraftKings that really stands out is Whiteside at 6,600. And it's not like it's the safest play. I kind of understand why he's only projected for 10% ownership. But at the same time, I think the range of outcomes is very similar to guys like Pirtle, Biyombo, like in that similar price range. For the season, Whiteside's at 1.2 DraftKings points per minute. In his 4 starts, he's only averaged 0.95 DraftKings points per minute. But that's not something I'm too concerned about because it's not like a lot of his production comes as like a super high usage guy off the bench. He has a very long track record of being well over a fantasy point per minute guy. And even last game where multiple Utah beat writers were tweeting about how Hassan Whiteside appeared to have no interest in even playing in the NBA anymore, he still played 32 minutes. So like the minutes have been there. He's averaging 30 and a half in his starts. As long as the ownership's low, I like getting there. If you give me a situation where like Jakob Poeltl and Hassan Whiteside are the same ownership, I'm taking Poeltl. But given the way we have things projected right now, I like Whiteside quite a bit in tournaments.
Yeah, Hassan Whiteside, I think, has made over $104 million in his career. I think that's a fair enough reason not to have any more interest playing in the NBA.
Yeah.
But he just does not look interested in playing at all at so many times throughout. Like even when the whole team was out, he just didn't do anything. So it's an interesting center slate in this game alone. So I like going to these guys a lot on FanDuel, aggressively getting over the field. And on FanDuel, the Utah guys, on DraftKings, not so much. They're all priced up/too expensive. But on to the last game we go. We got the Mavs and the Portland Trailblazers. Mavs and Blazers both on a back-to-back. The Mavs got collapsed by the Warriors last night, and the Trailblazers they got torched by Anthony Edwards at the end, and I think they lost in a buzzer beater by D'Angelo Russell or like a game winner by D'Angelo Russell. An interesting game in terms of fantasy wise, because there are some studs who can break the slate, and guys like Luka and Porzingis. We saw Tim Hardaway Jr. break his foot last night. And with Tim Hardaway Jr. breaking his foot, I do think the minutes get sprinkled around guys like Josh Green and Reggie Bullock. But that's just a little bit of uncertainty. It wouldn't shock me if Neil Aquina gets some extra minutes because of it out of that situation as well. Luka 11-1, Porzingis 7-6. I like going to Porzingis quite a bit on DraftKings. Even on FanDuel, I like going to Porzingis. If there was a map to roster tonight, it would be Porzingis for me, just because I think spending up for Luka, I potentially miss out on a Harden. I miss out on potentially a Jokic. He just doesn't seem as a priority spend up, but he's been playing much better of late. Talk to me about this Mavericks team with the loss of Tim Hardaway Jr. And do you expect the rotation to go out the same way as I do?
Yeah, so I don't think Hardaway's absence really matters that much. I'm with you. I think that you're just going to see more minutes for guys like Josh Green, Reggie Bullock, Frank Ntilikina, guys that just doesn't really matter for DFS. And Tim Hardaway Jr., it's kind of like Gordon Hayward, where he's like a 20% usage guy in the games that he's played with Doncic and with Porzingis, 8% assist percentage. That's mostly just going to whoever replaces him in the rotations. So I don't view it as anyone getting a huge bump. I do think Jalen Brunson's playing time probably increases by at least a little bit. He's only averaged 0.85 DraftKings points per minute in his games with Luka and Porzingis, but at $5,700, if he plays 34 minutes, that still is a pretty good option, especially in a favorable matchup as well. But I'm definitely with you on Porzingis. He was the number one guy in my DraftKings tournament video. I think I had him 2 or 3 on FanDuel, where like he's just projected to be underowned. Yeah, maybe he's not the best player. He's not everything that we want him to be, but we still have him projected for a 15% chance of being optimal on DraftKings with only 10% ownership. He's averaged 1.2 fantasy points per minute in the games that he's played with Luka. He's likely to give you 30 to 32 minutes in a pretty good spot here. Portland's front court is now shorthanded as well. So not that I care all that much about individual defense, but taking the guys that would be playing said defense out of the rotation shouldn't hurt. So yeah, I'm with you. I think Porzingis, this ownership looks really good.
Yeah, I think Porzingis is an outstanding play on the slate overall, and he's going to be low owned for the upside he carries. And yes, he played this Portland team earlier, and both teams were absolutely decimated. He torched them. He absolutely destroyed them in 3 quarters. Obviously, a completely different environment, but just wanted to throw that out there. Now, onto the Portland side we go. I've been targeting CJ McCollum since he's been back from injury, and the way the slates have worked out for him, there have been just massive slates where he just hasn't been like the greatest play in terms of like value or anything. Now he's priced down to $7,300. He's $7,900 on FanDuel. Comes in at $30 on Yahoo. I like going to McCollum yet again on the sites just because I think the upside has to happen. I said this last Wednesday. McCollum has been like a cheat code without Dame Lillard, and I still want to believe in that going into tonight. How do we view the Blazers and McCollum, and what this team is? Got back Norman Powell last night, but how do we attack this Blazers team in the late night hammer?
I don't really understand the salary on McCollum. The matchup's not super appealing. Dallas plays slow. The Blazers only have a 106 implied total, but going back to last year, you get like 1.15 DraftKings points per minute from McCollum without Lillard. This year, he's been at 1.1. He played 38 minutes last night. I think he played 36 or 37 the game before that. So you're just getting him back to playing his normal role where he plays a ton of minutes. He's going to have like a 30% usage rate. He's going to have the ball in his hands a ton. He's only $7,300. I mean, this is another guy where, on average, he probably gets you like 38, 40 DraftKings points to where you're not mad about it, but it's not winning you any tournaments. But he absolutely has the ability to just win a slate by himself, and he's not getting that much ownership, especially given this price tag. So don't love the matchup, but I do really like the salary on McCollum. Yusuf Nurkic is certainly another one of these center options where at 7,700 he has slate breaking potential. I don't think he's going to get that much ownership. Right now we have him at 16%. I could even see that coming down a little bit. Like I could see by the time we get to lock, maybe Whiteside has come up a little bit and Nurkic just has gone down. But he's just another one where, he's a 1.25 fantasy point per minute guy. He's going to play a lot of minutes tonight. He has been because the front court shorthanded anyway. Now you also take out Covington. You also take out Little. Nance is still out. Zeller's still out. You could conceivably get like a 36-minute Yusuf Nurkic game here. So I like him. The rest of the team, pretty indifferent. Powell was limited off the bench last night, so I have a hard time getting there. I don't like Simons quite as much with McCollum and Powell back. So it's pretty much McCollum and Nurkic for me.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I love McCollum again, and I don't mind sprinkling those other guys like Nurkic and Simons potentially. Prefer Nurkic to Simons if you're looking for a second Blazer, but McCollum seems pretty outstanding to me. Shout out to Cricket Samaritan. Needle to your eye. Bianca Whiteside, FanDuel GPP. Oh my God, it's gross, but I'm going to go with Whiteside. Take the savings. You can do a lot with $800 on a FanDuel slate. How about you?
Yeah, I'm assuming Biombo's higher on there too.
Jeez, God.
Let me see. Biombo's 6%, Whiteside. Oh, okay. So Biombo's 28, or Whiteside's 28%, but he's $800 less expensive. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think I would still rather have Whiteside, but you need to have like lower owned pieces elsewhere in your lineup. If you're looking at a lineup where you already have a bunch of popular plays, then the gap from Whiteside to Biyombo is not that big.
Yeah, I agree. And there's some talk in chat. I just like to clarify. I'm just like forced in a position to play Biyombo on DraftKings today, and it just hurts me. And I will have to make this decision by that game tips off, just because maybe this is the new Biyombo and he's a new lottery pick, but. Everyone hit the like button. If we can get to 600, that'd be fantastic. I really appreciate you guys giving the support. Adam, any final thoughts on this 10 gamer?
Not about the 10 gamer, but it just came up in chat. Michael Jordan wouldn't destroy anybody in this era. Probably time to go now.
But on that note, everyone, thanks so much for tuning into the Deeper Dive. Good luck, everyone. Hope someone takes it down, and catch you next time.
What's going on, guys? It is the Awesemo NBA Live Before Lock show Wednesdays, which means I'm hosting. Eric's the analyst. We're sponsored by Prize Picks. Do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Usual stuff on a 10-game slate. Lots of players on the injury report. We've gotten a lot of the pertinent news to this point. Not all of it, though. Fred VanVleet, still questionable. De'Aaron Fox, still questionable. Jared Allen, questionable. Desmond Bane, questionable. Scotty Barnes, questionable. Brandon Clark, questionable. DeAndre Hunter, questionable. Eric, which piece of news are you most excited to get here?
Well, I mean, now with Terrence Davis out indefinitely, Chimezie Metu just got ruled out before the show. I'm looking at Fox, and if Fox doesn't play here, this is going to be a really muddy, ridiculous team to try to figure out what to do with. Kind of a hashtag play all the dudes kind of spot. But then Buddy Hield's already 6,400 and 6,300 over on DK. So it's still kind of like a yikes kind of tag to be looking at for them. But I don't know who else is going to be playing minutes here for this team. I mean, they've kind of played shorter rotations of late. Damian Jones will be backing up, a popular Rashawn Holmes here in some spots for DK. On FanDuel, we don't have to think about him at 5,900, but Harrison Barnes, 6,100, and Buddy Hield, 5,200 is going to be like a popular spot for me to want to go. We already have him projected for 28 minutes. So if there's no Fox there, I mean, that's one team that I didn't even really have that much on my radar. And now I'm going to have big time on my radar with no Metu, no Davis, possibly no Fox.
Yeah, and I assume that Buddy Hield is going to end up starting anyway. He did start the second half, if I remember correctly, in place of Terrence Davis yesterday. Terrence Davis gets hit in the face. He's bleeding. He's hurt. He's not able to finish the game. Not that the Kings were losing by 10 billion points. Terrence Davis was doing pretty well from a points per minute perspective yesterday. So that was a little bit of a bummer for me. I was a little bit overweight to the field on him, but realistically, how much longer was he going to be out on the court? That game was not competitive at all. So I guess we can just kind of go into some of the position by position now. As some of that injury news comes out, we'll obviously be hitting on it. I could throw the mask on, do some injury report updates if any kind of crazy breaking news happens. But let's start by talking about some of the guards today, and let's start by talking about James Harden. Went massive game last night. Kind of all of the guys that you and I like to pay up for yesterday. James Harden, Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid. It turned out once push came to shove, you couldn't have gone wrong with any of them. All three of them scored over 70 DraftKings points. Similar spot for James Harden today. All of the other guys for the Nets are out. No Kyrie Irving, no Kevin Durant. Really shorthanded starting lineup. How high of a priority is going back to Harden for you today?
It's a priority. I will say I'm on the same page as you. Like, his ownership just looks too low. It was way too low yesterday. I mean, you were on to that. We didn't project him around like 35, 36% over on FanDuel. He ended up being like 53.5%. He's dual eligible. You can play him at small forward now as well over there. I'm playing primarily on FanDuel today. I made a couple lineups so that I can refer to some stuff on DK to be able to be, helpful and stuff like my job. But 10-2 on FanDuel is a joke. Like, it's a joke tag. I know it's a back-to-back. I know it's Denver, but I mean, if Nikola Jokic and him, like, I don't know which other two studs you'd really want to be going to. Like, Giannis Antetokounmpo makes sense at 11-2 on FanDuel to get to a little bit here. But there's a number of other guys on his team. Cleveland's been better defensively, obviously, this season for a number of reasons, Mobley being the main one. And James Harden is 10-2. He's literally $1,000 less. He's way cheaper than Jokic over there with its 11-8. Like, he's just a joke how easy it is to play him in lineup. So James Harden, massive priority for me on this slate.
Something else that I like here is if we get enough value, and it's already viable, although it's not necessarily the most comfortable lineup construction, and there are a lot of centers to like on this slate, but there is some added correlation to building lineups that have James Harden and Nikola Jokic both in them. And I think they're pretty clearly the top two pay-up options on the slate. So I like the idea of, hey, maybe we get a shootout, Brooklyn, Denver. And by the way, if these teams shoot out, it stands to reason Jokic and Harden are both having big fantasy games. Nobody else could do crap on either of these teams. No Kyrie and no Durant for the Nets. So we saw yesterday, there was a point in the game for the Nets where it was like Harden had 28 real life points. The rest of the starters had combined for 12. And then Jokic, doing his normal thing. Plus we've got Will Barton is questionable on the injury report. So I think there's a pretty good chance here that we get a shootout between the Nets and Nuggets, and we just get another 270 plus fantasy point games out of Harden and Jokic. Is that something you're considering at all, building lineups, is maybe trying to go superstars and scrubs to get both of them in the same lineup?
Yeah, people are asking, but how do you afford them? We also got news Jared Allen is going to play here, so that's check on that. I didn't really know what to think. Obviously, he was out Monday. I thought that was a long time to be sitting out for a non-COVID illness, but he's in. But looking at this game, I'm with you. I think that, it's definitely a spot. Jokic, Harden, their priorities. I think their priorities for everybody, though. So, I mean, I am trying to involve other pieces of the game. Kessler Edwards is 4K on FanDuel, less of a talking point where he's 4,300 on DraftKings. I don't think you really need to go there, but I mean, he definitely provides some savings. People are asking about how you afford these guys. I think FanDuel pricing has been pretty soft throughout this entire season. They have started aggressively pricing up certain studs, but we have a 5K Cameron Johnson. I mean, we have a number of spots that could be waiting in the wings there. I mean, Utah, you always have Joe Ingles as like a 4K option. Dorian Finney-Smith is 4,300, and now you're going to have extra minutes available. He's been a guy who's played some big minutes in the past. We have him projected around 33 minutes. I think that's about perfect. I think there's a number of shots that you can take throughout the board. Play more than one lineup. I'm playing a bunch of lineups, and I think finding some exposure to these 4 or 5K range on FanDuel shouldn't be too hard to be able to fit a ton of Jokic and a ton of Harden.
Yeah, and just really quickly while we were talking, I just made a quick crunch of lineups where I locked in Harden, I locked in Jokic, and built 150 lineups to see what other players would come up around them. And I mean, the lineups it's not ideal. Obviously, I don't want to have 150 lineups with all Harden and all Jokic, but it's not like I have poorly projected lineups with those guys in. There's cheap players that I do like quite a bit today. Cameron Johnson, Terrence Mann is somebody who I think is being overlooked by the field with Marcus Morris out. Cody Martin's popping up in a bunch of those lineups. Rashawn Holmes, now that the Kings are going to be shorthanded in the front court. There's a lot of cheaper plays that I like getting to that I don't think it's crazy to have lineups that have both Embiid and to have both Jokic and Harden in. So I'm not saying you have to go out and do that, but I'm going to have some lineups that have both of them. And I don't think it's super restrictive for a 10-game slate where there's likely going to end up being a lot of value because we already have a lot of value and there's still players on the injury report that's going to open up even more value. In terms of the other guards, what pay up options are you looking at if it isn't James Harden, or is it just James Harden?
No, I mean, there's other spots. I mean, Luka Doncic obviously has a massive ceiling, and Tim Hardaway Jr., slight usage bump maybe for him and Porzingis going forward, but nothing that's going to be crazy for me. I think John Morant is sub 10K over on FanDuel still, and that's going to be intriguing, but the field's around 23.6%. I don't think that's like a massive point of leverage. DeJounte Murray, nobody's going to argue that he doesn't have a ceiling either here. He's garnering even a little bit more attention at 10% over on FanDuel specifically is kind of where I'm talking about there. We have a number of other pieces in like this mid 8K range. If Fred VanVleet does play at 8,500 against Chicago, I mean, Chicago's defense is going to look very, very different. Obviously, no Alex Caruso. They're going to bring Zach LaVine back in. He's not very good at it. So like, I'm looking at Fred VanVleet at 8,500 as a guy that if good to go. I don't know how many people are going to be getting there the way that they should. And Toronto's been running such a tight rotation, massive minutes to every single one of these starters. I think him sub 3%, that would be definitely a guy. Shout out EMAC 2024. I think he's definitely a guy in the Fred Van Elite contest that you should be playing a lot of over on DK. And then specifically for me on FanDuel, 8,500 is too cheap.
Yeah, and as the debates rage in YouTube chat about historical ranks today of NBA players, yeah, I like EMAC to weigh in and tell us what it was like to see Dolph Shays live, because that's something it's these old players. I just haven't seen that much of them, and what did those guys look like in the
Elgin Baylor? I mean, he's got to be up there. Come on now, what was Parrish? Rob Parrish? Come on now, GOAT action.
Who's the I mean, how many people saw a young Oscar Robertson? How many people got to see a young Bill Russell?
Oh,
right. That's where you rely on EMAC for some of this stuff, because don't forget EMAC was around before cameras. So there's a lot of these older basketball players that we don't have info to, that EMAC's going to be a great source for us on that. So EMAC 2024 to really help us out and give us a piece of history. Also, getting back to the James Harden thing for a second, I want to point out the ownership projections are free today over at Awesemo.com. Something to definitely go check out. We've got James Harden projected for 44% ownership on FanDuel. Mm-hmm. I think that number's worth being overweight to. On DraftKings, we have him projected for 26.5%, also a number I think that's being overweight to. So we talked about liking James Harden quite a bit, but relative to those ownership numbers, particularly the FanDuel one, where he's going to be in nearly 50% of the field's lineups, do you like being over to that number?
Yeah, I like being over on both numbers. I mean, this is just a spot where like James Harden is going to do everything for this basketball team. I'm not breaking any news to anybody. I mean, his usage rate, assist rate, rebound rate, everything is off the charts. No Kyrie Irving, no Kevin Durant on the floor. It really becomes the James Harden show. And I'm just kind of rerunning everything right now. 34, it's ridiculous. So hang on, Kevin Durant. Why is he still showing up when I take him off the floor here? Whatever. 28.3% usage is kind of what it's at. Again, Kyrie and Kevin Durant off the floor. I don't know why it's sticking as I'm doing this rerun, but it's just ridiculous. Some of the rates that we have for him in this spot. Yesterday, it was kind of like sleepwalking a little bit against that Lakers game. I watched quite a bit of it out here, and it was just kind of, a pedestrian 37.1% usage rate. Probably one of the easiest looking near triple doubles that you're ever going to see there, or triple doubles. He did officially get there. 33, 12, and 11, 73 fantasy points. I see a lot of that in store here again. 11.5. He's underpriced for no Kevin Durant and no Kyrie Irving. And that's weird to say at 11.5.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, particularly with what we saw yesterday. And we've seen this how many times in the past where James Harden doesn't have his other stars alongside him, whether it was, when he was running with Chris Paul, when he was with Russell Westbrook. We've seen him get up to $13,000 or higher, his salaries on FanDuel and DraftKings in these situations. So no issue paying for that whatsoever. I see now we got Emac. He's bringing up George Mikan. People don't realize Emac taught George Mikan the George Mikan drill. It didn't exist before then. Emac's the one who actually coined it. So pay that man some respect. Vote for him for president in 2024. Eric, looking at the guard position, we're going to be paying up for James Harden a lot, you and I. Which are some of the cheap players at guard that you're going to be rostering the most that are going to let you pay up for Harden?
Whoa, James Harden questionable.
Oh, well, there we go.
Son of a
All right,
bitch.
well, now this changes everything.
Oh my God.
First of all, here's what we're doing. I don't have, unfortunately,
playing.
I'm not logged into Sportswitch right now, so I'm probably going to miss out on this. If you could, let's go bet the Nuggets.
Quick.
And we've got Day'Ron Sharp ruled out. Oh my God, this is insane. Okay, yeah, I wasn't quick enough. Wait. Oh my God,
over here. What's happening?
Oh my, I'm trying to bet it, and I'm
trying to get on Prize Picks right now. So head to prizepicks.com, our sponsor. I'm going to try to see if there's any props that we have on the board right now. You need to fire these immediately. I am going to get Patty Mills over 14.5 points. It's a click. And we're going to parlay that with, let's see, points, rebounds, assists. Please have LaMarcus Aldridge. Kessler Edwards, 15.5 points, rebounds, and assists, smashing the over. Putting them together.
All right. So I was able, nice.
Boom. Done.
All right.
Patty
so
Mills,
we've
Kessler
got
Edwards, overs. Smash it.
All right. So Denver Nuggets minus 135. I've got Nuggets minus 2.5. I'm feeling good here. Now the line is.
Oh, I'm hitting
down.
the over again. There's a 19.5 Patty Mills points, rebounds, assists. I love that. Smash.
So now, is it reasonable to assume James Harden doesn't play? That he was just downgraded to questionable, and this game starts in an hour and 40 minutes? Like this totally screws the entire slate. Then now everything's just gotten ridiculous. What do you think? You gun to your head, because this is what happened yesterday, right? Somebody held a gun to my head to ask about whether they were going to.
It's fine.
Yeah, gun to your head. Does James Harden play or not? And you're not allowed to cheat and check see if he has the green check mark or not. Does Harden play? No, that's
why would they downgrade him here? That game tips off in what, an hour and 40 minutes? Yeah, he's not playing today.
That is my read as well. So we also have Day'Ron Sharp has been ruled out. This is a whole situation we have going on here. So let's go step by step. Day'Ron Sharp, we know for sure. What's that?
Difference in a different way. You don't know Step by Step, the song?
No, I don't. But I was confused by whatever just happened. I know that I'm sure YouTube chat will be thrilled with with you serenading them. But let's start with Day'Ron Sharp, because that's something we know for sure is going to be the case. What do the Nets do in the front court? Because in addition to Day'Ron Sharp being out, obviously there's no Kevin Durant. Nick Claxton, he's been out a ton as of late, back-to-back, so he's resting. Paul Millsap, he's out because he just doesn't want to play for the Nets anymore. He wants there to be a situation where he's getting more playing time. Here are the available big men for the Nets today. LaMarcus Aldridge, Blake Griffin, and those are the big men. I guess James Johnson.
James Johnson is my favorite. That's who I was waiting for you to say.
Yeah, so we can consider James Johnson a forward as well. Who are the big men that are going to stand out the most to you here from the Nets?
Yeah, LaMarcus Aldridge, obviously 5,300. You get no. I'm going to now run it with no Kevin Durant, no Kyrie Irving, and no James Harden. Love this diatribe we went on for James Harden for the first 15 minutes,
Yeah, of
and
course.
now it's just
Always.
out. Like that's just going to be the case here. Oh, got to take Daron Sharp off the floor too, because he has the highest usage rate with Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden off the floor at 30.4% this season, which is pretty bonkers because, that would be the thing. I saw James Harden questionable and I was like, we got to bet that immediately. Glad that we got on that. The timing of betting almost matters more than the bet itself. That's just a way to look at it. As expected, LaMarcus Aldridge, 29.6% usage over the course of this last year with no Kevin Durant, Irving, Harden, or Sharp on the floor. Patty Mills, 27.2%. I knew it was going to be high. I didn't know it was going to be that high for him. Cam Thomas sitting there, 26.7%. Everybody else sub 20. Blake Griffin actually kind of next in line there. For me, Blake Griffin's tough because I don't know what those minutes are going to look like. I'm assuming James Harden's going to be on the floor. Like you're going to have a true center out there in Nikola Jokic. It's not that LaMarcus Aldridge is going to be able to, he's going to absolutely get tooled by Nikola Jokic. It's the same thing I said about Joel Embiid going completely nuts on Willie Hernangomez. I think that came to fruition. I think everybody could agree with that. But I'm looking at this entire front court. Like you've got James Johnson. I think he's probably my second favorite. Blake Griffin, I'll see where the ownership lands on him. If people just assume that he's going to be backing up Aldridge, I'll probably just go heavier on Aldridge. He's going to be the one that gets the most ownership, but James Johnson really makes a lot of sense. Played 24 minutes. He's been in the rotation of late here. So I think I feel a little bit more confident with that. He's 3,300, but he's power forward only. The nice thing about Blake Griffin, I guess you don't really want to play him at center, but he at least has other lineup spots. He has access to power forward center. So I'm looking at that front court. For me, I'm just ranking it straight out. Aldridge, clear cut priority. James Johnson 2, Blake Griffin 3. How about you?
Let's see. So I'm kind of reworking. You're just asking me front court players, right?
The
big
court,
men for now.
The front court guys.
Aldridge.
I mean, the backcourt is a whole nother shenanigans.
Yeah. So I'm curious to see what the Nets starting lineup is. Steve Nash, not to be trusted. He tinkers around with his lineups and does goofy shit all the time. But in terms of the big men, pretty clear for me to prioritize LaMarcus Aldridge. I assume he's going to start at center with Daron Sharp out. And then something else is that LaMarcus Aldridge would carry a pretty significant usage rate. We've seen him be a good fantasy producer this year. We've seen him take shots when he needs to. So LaMarcus Aldridge, we have seen him now with a usage rate over 20% in every single game since coming back from injury. And LaMarcus Aldridge this year so I think this is a good way to look at LaMarcus Aldridge's numbers. As a starter, he only has a 19.3% usage rate, but on a lot of those starts, he was sharing the court with Durant and Harden. When he comes off the bench, he has a 27.9% usage rate. That's pretty much in line with what I would be expecting today because there is no Durant, there's no Harden, there's no Irving. Aldridge, to me now, is probably my favorite play on the slate.
Yep, I think he's got to be. I mean, Patty Mills, oh my God. I can't tell you how much Patty Mills I just got in. I brought up his usage rate, near 30% there, just behind LaMarcus Aldridge. 30, what is it? Where did it just go? I just had it on the page. 28.6% Patty Mills, his assist rate with no Durant, Irving, Harden, Sharp. I mean, we're looking at strict playing through Patty Mills double-double situation there. He's 4,900 over on DK. That is going to be very appealing with the double-double bonus. I mean, he is going to be the guy that they're playing through pretty much predominantly here in this spot. And then over on FanDuel, he's 5,200. I mean, that is going to just be really hard for me to get away from as well. As you said, that starting lineup is going to be interesting. They can go Cam Thomas. I'm assuming Bruce Brown is probably the guy who 1-for-1. I know he's been out of the rotation randomly in some of these spots, but he gets these spot starts where he just plays a bunch of minutes. He did play 21. They got knocked out of the gym there towards the end. It wasn't as close as that 10-point spread would indicate for the end of the game, but he's been kind of a guy that's been plugged in to fit in for those minutes. DeAndre Bembry is back. He did start that last game 30 minutes against the Lakers. It's going to come down to who else starts here, but Patty Mills, I think, clear cut along with Aldridge, the two best plays now.
So now I'm going to ask you a strategy question because while we're assuming you and I that Harden out, we don't know that definitively. We're making an educated guess, and I think both you and I would agree there's a chance that Harden plays. We're leaning towards him not playing, but the reality is they've ruled out Daron Sharp. James Harden's listed as questionable. There's still the opportunity for him to end up playing. So how are you going to go out about building your lineups in Fantasy Cruncher given this Harden situation and some of the uncertainty surrounding it?
See, I think what's really nice is you have John Morant sitting there at 9,900 on FanDuel. Over on DK, what is John Morant's tag? He is 9,900 there as well. I think if you just front load a bunch of him into lineups, if you want to get to more of him, I don't feel terrible getting to him in lineups, but I'm going to need $300. Obviously, he's point guard over on FanDuel, so maybe that's less appealing to try to make that work. Maybe CJ McCollum is a guy that you could boost. Get a boost to some guys who have later start times. Obviously, we're waiting on Fred VanVleet news as well. So that's going to matter quite a bit for my lineups as well. I think he makes for a great tournament play on a 10-game slate if he's in. But you want to if you want to have some James Harden in your life, just get to a bunch of John Morant over on DK, have some extra roster spots. I mean, I think Dallas, Portland, there's some Utah pieces, Phoenix, of course, Cameron Johnson over on DK, lots of guys that you could get to, that it's not the worst thing if you end up with them in lineups. And, for me, I'm going to be building mostly to account for James Harden being out. But if you want to have an allotment of lineups where you want to crunch with him still in, simply give a boost to somebody else later in that evening, or in the event that you want to build without James Harden like me and you want to give a boost to somebody later in that evening, you might be able to swap onto more shares than the average player. If you give more Morant, more of like the expensive guys, and you have roster spots available.
Yeah, so I just reran a set of lineups without Harden. So I have a set of lineups with Harden, I have a set of lineups without Harden. I'm just kind of comparing them to see what the difference is. For starters, Aldridge, this is kind of irregular. I'm getting to a lot of Aldridge. That's going to be the case. But if I'm taking Harden out of the mix and just kind of with my assumption, what I think the Nets do with their starting lineup, I'm also getting to a lot of Bembry and Edwards as value options. Patty Mills as well, but really a lot more Bembry than I would have expected. I guess it's just price point driven. He's only 3,400. I get to more of Jokic because obviously I have more salary to spend. Then there's other guards that end up getting to a decent amount more as pay up options. Guys like Trae Young, DeJounte Murray are popping up for me a lot more than they were before. I mean, James Harden was my most rostered player on the slate. Now I just made a build where I took him out. It changes everything. There is nothing that looks remotely the same in this build as it did for me a few minutes ago. So which are some of the high-end guards that you think you want to prioritize if there is no Harden?
Yeah, so I mean, Fred VanVleet, again, it's just 8,500. Maybe you don't even need to be looking like that low. Luka Doncic would be a guy that I would want to get more shares of on FanDuel. 11-4. No Tim Hardaway Jr. going forward here for this team. Didn't play well, but only had to play 27 minutes last night against Golden State. They got ran out of the gym there in that third quarter. So I think he would be a guy that you just are going to have some more salary. Get to some more of the studs. I mean, this gives you, in the event that James Harden's out, you just have so much more access to some of these top end dudes to just jam the stars and scrubs approach. And, that makes Luka Doncic appealing at guard. DeJounte Murray is somebody that on both sides, I think, is appealing. Nobody would argue with his ceiling. John Morant, though, really 9,900 on both sides becomes a guy that I just really like. I know Rayen talked on the last show a little bit that wasn't his favorite play. I see no reason not to like John Morant in his current situation. He's been consistent. The usage has been off the charts the last two games, 40% plus. I think he checks every single box. Probably not looking at Chris Paul as much at 9,700, just getting to be pretty expensive there. He has been out of his mind, no doubt about it. But I'd be more inclined to go Trae Young, looking at more Fred VanVleet. And then, they're not the top end yet, but Tyrese Halliburton would be a guy. If you get no De'Aaron Fox, 7,700 for him on FanDuel, I would have an irrational amount of today.
Also, for those of you interested in this information, the Denver Nuggets have moved from 2.5-point favorites to 4.5-point favorites. And they went from minus 135 on the money line to minus 196. So we have definitely seen a reaction to James Harden being listed as questionable. But now with that said, that number is still an in-between number. A lot of people look at the line move and say, oh, they know something. Not really. If Harden gets ruled out, that line's going to become much wider. We're going to see Denver end up being, like an 8.5-point road favorite or something like that. If Harden's ruled in, that number goes right back to the 2.5 number that it was before, because we already seen what the number was, assuming Harden was in. Let's just kind of circling back on the guard position. Are there any loose ends? What have we not mentioned at guard that's going to be important for you today? We kind of got lost in the Harden news because obviously it's quite important.
Gigantic. It's the most important news we have on the slate now, because it's a guy that I was going to get to 70+% in my lineups on both sites. And, obviously I'm just playing, I guess, primarily on FanDuel here today. So I don't want to misspeak there. I was going to have a crazy amount of him at 10-2 on FanDuel. And now you're looking at playing everybody around him and not him. pretty strange how that can change immediately like that. But Tyrese Halliburton, kind of revisiting that. Buddy Hield, such an important talking point for me. And I think people who listen to the Slate Starter podcast know I'm not a Buddy Hield guy, but I don't know where these minutes go to in the absence of Terrence Davis and De'Aaron Fox, if not him. Davion Mitchell, I think, is 4,900. That's just too expensive. He can have some stock upside from time to time. The usage rate has had some random spikes from here and there. He went 3 for 15 the other night against Boston in that absolute annihilation that they had there. But like, Jameis Ramsey's really the only other guard that exists there. They might have to play Mo Harkless minutes just in the absence of some of these other guys. I don't think it'll be Lewis King. So I think Buddy Hield becomes one of my favorite tournament plays at 5,200. Obviously very boom bust. He's a guy that can go out and just get you a bucket. You can also just go broke and then you're in a lot of trouble, but there's no ownership there right now. So if that news can come out a little bit later, that'd be great. Cause I like playing Buddy Hield when he's low owned. I hate playing him when he's chalky.
So we just got a Clippers starting lineup. It is Reggie Jackson. It is Jordan's guy, Amir Coffey, Terrence Mann, Nick Batum, Ivica Zubats. I really like Terrence Mann today. We saw some people early in the chat who were set, who apparently they didn't, Marcus Morris is out. Is Marcus Morris really out? I think Marcus Morris is playing. Marcus Morris is out today. Terrence Mann started last game, played a ton of minutes. I don't understand why this guy isn't picking up more ownership. Let me look at the most recent run that we have here. Terrence Mann is projected for, now he's a little more popular, actually. I'm going to have to rescind that. Earlier run of ownership, he was not popular. Now he's projected for 24% on DK. FanDuel still only projected for 11% ownership. That is way too low for me. What do you make of Terrence Mann as a starter? Started for the Clippers yesterday, ended up playing 32 minutes, scored 33 fantasy points. Is there any reason to think he won't play that same role today?
Yeah, no, he's going to play about the same role. I mean, on FanDuel, I think Amir Coffey is the guy that you want to be playing a little bit more of. He's been starting a lot. These minutes are all over the place, but it's really dependent on these game scripts. And like the Clippers have been competitive in games that I wouldn't expect them to be as competitive in. They ended up winning in Philadelphia, that crazy come from behind win. Obviously, there's just a lot more usage available for everybody, more rebounds available for everybody. No Marcus Morris out there. And I would say Terrence Mann is the most, I would say he has the widest range of outcomes for what that minutes could be out of the starters. Like Amir Coffey, I mean, I'm pretty certain he's going to play a lot of minutes here in this spot once again. But like Terrence Mann, if you go through his box score, and it's just kind of watching a lot of Clippers basketball out here in LA, it's just sometimes he'll play 15, 20 minutes out of the middle of nowhere if he gets off to a poor start. Even in some of his starts, he's gone as low as like 26 minutes, but he has an upside of like 37. So Terrence Mann is definitely a guy. 4,200, Amir Coffey, 4,400 on FanDuel. I think both of those are more than viable on this slate.
Let's see. Amir, I'm not really getting to Coffey. Coffey, I mean, it's a reasonable enough price tag, 4,400 for him over on FanDuel. On DK, 5,500. That's a little steep. So obviously more favorable for him on FanDuel than DK. If you had to roster one of Mann or Coffey, which way would you choose? It's Mann for me.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've seen some of these just spike usage games. I mean, he'll go a game where he just doesn't attempt many threes, and then he'll go out there and knock down a bazillion of them. Amir Coffey, very, very boom bust. But I would say I probably like the upside of Amir Coffey a little bit more. Terrence Mann is going to be more consistent, but I think for tournaments at the exact same ownership, which is what we have here, I mean, I'm going to be kind of refreshing that as we get closer. That's in the early window of games that locks in 26 minutes, but I think I actually prefer Amir Coffey between the two.
I've Mann projected quite a bit higher, so it's going to be hard for me to not go with Mann. I think there's more upside in Mann also. I get Coffey's been good. I'm sure that Jordan Klein's going to be playing him in a whole bunch of lineups. I'm sure he's going to be texting us in the group chat about him after every fantasy point he scores. But it's going to be a lean towards Terrence Mann.
So Restream Bot brings up a good point, but it's also, look, I want to just throw this out there. We always talk about late swap. We're preaching late swap here. Like Brooklyn is definitely going to be a piece that Greg and I are both prioritizing. We're simply talking about complementary pieces. And I think that that's what a guy like Terrence Mann or Amir Coffey, I'm going to have a little bit of both, but I'm not going to get to like 30%, 25% of those guys. I want as much swappability. I want as much access to Brooklyn as humanly possible. I'm assuming when somebody gets downgraded, that's a stud on a back-to-back in the middle of like the day where it's, hour and a half, hour 40 minutes before tip. they're just not going to play. So I'm going full steam ahead with that plan. If you want to join me, yeah, can we get burned by it? Sure. But the amount of upside, because that news isn't official right now, and people don't have that factored into their projections entirely yet, is just such an edge on a slate like this. So yeah, I'm going to get to Man and Coffee, but they're not going to be massive pieces of a portfolio.
Yeah. So the other thing for me also is I've already taken Harden out. I've built my lineups now. The set that I am making and I'm uploading is assuming Harden isn't in. Yep. So I'm getting to Scherer's a man, but that's already with Kessler Edwards, LaMarcus Aldridge, DeAndre Bembry, Patty Mills, all looking like good value plays for me. I still have Man in the mix, and I'm getting more of the Nets guys than him. So it's not something where I don't necessarily think I need the swap ability because I already have it. I'm already playing a bunch of these Nets guys. For me personally, I think that's a reasonable way to build these lineups is just take these guys out. Or take Harden out,
So how much Bembry did you say you were getting to? He's the absolute floor. He's 3,500 over on FanDuel. He's shooting guard, small forward. So I kind of wanted to round it out asking you about him.
He's my favorite. He's actually my most rostered player right now.
That's what I was getting at is that I think we didn't really like specify. Patty Mills is 5,200 on FanDuel, which is fine. I think on DK he's more appealing, sub 5K and the double bonus. Talked about how outrageous his usage and assist rate are in the absence of everybody. But like Kessler Edwards, DeAndre Bembry, I think I'm going to get a massive ownership discount on Bembry.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be an ownership discount on all of these guys, but just given what his price point is, and as is, he played a bunch of minutes yesterday with Harden in. Now we're going to be taking Harden out. Who knows what the Nets are going to do with their starting lineup, but I think Bembry's fairly safe to play 30 plus minutes, considering the 3,400 price tag on DK, 3,500 on FanDuel. I really like him as a value play. I'll change that if he's not starting, but I assume he will be. We got a super chat here from Michael Pizzulli. He's asking, hey guys, any interest in Ellaby on FanDuel with an injured Portland front court? As always, thank you. Thank you, Michael. We appreciate the super chat. That's a no for me on Ellaby. I know there was one game where he did pretty well, where Portland was really shorthanded. But if I remember correctly, a lot of it was kind of fluky. It came from defensive stats late in the game. And there also might... it was also
that lineup.
The final score of that game was 140 to 108. And Ellaby played all of the garbage time in that game. I wouldn't look at that game and say this is what Portland does in that situation. I think more realistically, you're looking at 18 to 20 minutes from Ellaby. Could he play well? Yes, but is he likely to outscore all the other value options that are starting to open up for us? No. So the Ellaby is not somebody I think is worth rostering today.
Yeah, I mean, I know Ellaby well simply because he kind of randomly ended up in a couple of my lineups. I thought that they were going to get the doors blown off of him. They were very shorthanded in that game. And I wanted to find a way. I had been playing a lot of Simons and he was like 74, 7,600 in that spot. And I was like, if I'm going to get away from him, I better have some Ellaby. So like, if you're going to play a narrative, like if you think that they're going to just get the doors blown off of them by Dallas, which is in the range of outcomes, sure. But, for me, it's just not a roster spot there. God, that just reminds me of that was the Trendon Watford ended up having two lineups past me. I was in like third on FanDuel and then two lineups past me. So I only won like 6K or something. I was pretty distraught about that. Trendon Watford at like 0.2% ownership. That was sad.
So we've got Bean Dude left us a question. Super chat IOU. Bean Dude's a good guy. I assume that at some point we must have missed one of his super chats. So he is asking Murray or Luka. He says it's a super chat IOU. I have more exposure right now to Murray. I have very similar exposure to both of them, but a slight lean towards Murray. Obviously, more fantasy points. That's Luka for me. Points per dollar, slight lean towards Murray. What's your preference, Luka Doncic versus DeJounte Murray?
I mean, with the amount of guys that I'm getting to, I mean, I think Luka is just going to be a lot lower owned, and I want to get to a bunch of him if I'm going to just be prioritizing some of this value from Brooklyn that we're assuming is going to exist. I mean, there's no doubt. Like, obviously, he's cheaper. Specifically on FanDuel, 11.4 is a lot different than paying 10.3 for DeJounte Murray. But I think I'm just going to prioritize a little bit more of the lower owned Doncic just because I do have the money now.
Yeah, so we'll move to forward now. listen, something happens like that, James Harden gets downgraded to questionable. He's projected to be the most rostered player on the slate. It's hard not to spend a lot of time on that. So we'll do more of an abbreviated look at the forwards and centers. First, though, shout out to Prize Picks sponsoring today's show. Eric and I are going to be sticking around for 30 minutes after lock talking about Prize Picks. And you guys should be sticking around too, because there's going to be other news that breaks. Pretty good chance we get a Nets starting lineup, James Harden update in the final 30 minutes. Guys are going to stick around to watch for that. Something else you're going to want to do. Sign up at Prize Picks for the first time using the promo code Awesemo. You get up to a $100 bonus on your first deposit. You also get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Also, if you're looking for the best props to play on Prize Pick, check out OddsShopper, free tool to use over at Awesemo.com, and just a really useful way to find the best props out there relative to our projections. You compare them to the stuff over on Prize Picks and find the props you want to build your cards around. All right, Eric, let's hit on forwards and just kind of looking at a broader picture. Who are the forwards that you're prioritizing the most on this slate?
I mean, it's changed drastically. Bembry is 3,500 on FanDuel. I have way more of him than I was hoping in a day like today. Kessler Edwards is 4K. He was already garnering some attention on FanDuel, so I don't think he's going to go overlooked. So if we're talking leverage, I think I'm getting more leverage by playing Bembry. That's why I specifically asked Greg about that. I just think he really stands out as a play you want to get to. A guy that I'm getting to a lot more than I was before as well is Giannis. 11-2. I'm going to be prioritizing a lot of studs. I have all of these guys, James Johnson, it might be Blake Griffin. We're going to have Bembry. I think regardless, we're going to have Kessler Edwards. These are all guys that are sub 4K or below over on FanDuel. I have money to fit like 3 guys on FanDuel. I can play the likes of Luka, Jokic, and Giannis. Like, that's a thing that's actually viable to do now. I want to get to some of those ceilings. Before I was going to talk about Jimmy Butler, 8,700. I still like him, but he's already garnering, 15% rostership. I'm going to go to the guy who has the higher floor, higher ceiling now, where I have the money to pay up for him. So this slate has changed quite a bit for me in that regard. So Giannis, shout out. Not that that should really surprise any of you.
Yeah, no, that does not surprise me at all. So for me, at least, forwards that I'm getting to a lot, once again, Bembry. Here's somebody also I think we should be talking about is how are you handling Cody Martin? Because he's somebody that I do think is a really strong value option considering the players that are missing for the Charlotte Hornets right now. But that is also somebody who's going to be taking up a roster spot in the early slate of games. So Cody Martin, who is 4K over on DK on FanDuel, he's all the way priced down to 3,500. I know we didn't really mention him when it came to guards, but because he's also a forward on DK, I think we could talk about him here. How are you going to be approaching him? Clearly a really strong points per dollar play, but the opportunity cost is you might lose a roster spot to play some guys in the later spots of games. So what are you going to be doing with Martin?
He was my favorite value play before the Brooklyn news. Cody Martin, I had 51.5% of on FanDuel in my first initial crunch, playing 100 lineups today. And looking at that initial crunch, it's just drastically different because now I have Aldridge, Bembry, Edwards, Mills that are all 4 guys that I have more rostered than him. He's still going to get to around 25-30% of my lineups here at the moment, unless we were to get the official word on things that James Harden's out, in which case just everything changes for me drastically. I'll take all of the leverage, but Cody Martin's in too good of a spot. He is the absolute floor on FanDuel. There's no way that I'm going to get away from that, but for me, it's giving up the leverage that I have of other pieces waiting in the wings. So I'm not going to be fading it. There's no way that I'm fading a $3,500 player in this spot with the amount of opportunities projected for 33 minutes. He's, played big minutes, hasn't necessarily shot the ball as much as you would hope. He's always been kind of a low usage guy, but anybody playing as many minutes as him for Charlotte in a game with almost nearly 230 total is going to be very viable at the absolute floor.
Yeah, we just got the Hornets starting lineup: LaMelo Ball, Terry Rozier, Cody Martin, Miles Bridges, Mason Plumlee. So Martin is confirmed starting. Fred VanVleet, Scotty Barnes, they're both still questionable, going to be game time decisions. We'll find out a little bit closer to that game starting, which leads me to the next guy I want to ask you about is how are you handling Pascal Siakam? We both liked him a whole bunch yesterday. We had him projected for, I don't even remember what it was, like 45 or 46 minutes. And that's why he had such a high projection yesterday. He ended up playing a ton of minutes for the Raptors yesterday. Massive fantasy game, and he was assists, rebounds, scoring. Pascal Siakam did it all for the Raptors yesterday. But with news that Fred VanVleet and Scotty Barnes are both questionable, obviously we're going to like Siakam less if those guys end up playing today. how much of your lineups do you want to try to allocate space to hold on to Siakam? Because clearly a great play if those guys are out, not as much if they're in.
Yeah, Pascal Siakam, 1.15 DraftKings points per minute on the season. That goes up to 1.22 with no Fred VanVleet on the floor. It's just a drastic difference that you're looking at for him. 0.07. You're talking about on a slate with 10 games. He's a guy that I really do like playing in some of these spots. I mean, Rayen was super high on him once again here for this slate, talking to him last night on the Slate Starter Pod. And I don't know how you wouldn't be. The guy's been insane, but it's just too expensive. 8,900 for his role alongside Fred VanVleet. If you don't have FVV out there, I'm happy to be taking shots on Siakam, but I'm not going to get to 10% of him. I'm not in the event that you have Fred VanVleet. So I'm going to try to prioritize. I've already talked about that. I think Fred makes for such a strong play at low ownership in the event that he gets ruled in. But if he's not there, I'm going to try to find paths. I will have some power forward spots available. I'm going to have some salary available with how much Jokic I've got. That game starts at 8 p.m. Eastern time, same time as Toronto. So that Brooklyn-Denver game, Toronto-Chicago game, really nice that it starts at the same time. So I should have salary and ability to get to a power forward only Pascal Siakam over on FanDuel where he's 8,900.
And I just got some Raptors news here that came across too. Nick Nurse is going to go to playing a 9 to 10 man rotation going forward as the schedule gets a little tighter. A lot of games coming up in a short window for the Toronto Raptors. So we saw these Raptors guys playing 40, 42 minutes every night. It was clearly not sustainable, as evidenced by Fred VanVleet is hurt right now because of knee soreness. Scotty Barnes dealing with a wrist injury. Does this news change how you impact the Raptors at all? Because we did see some of their starters, Chris Boucher and Precious Achiuwa, play less minutes than we were projecting them for yesterday, in part because they did go to a deeper rotation. Does this news that now Nurse has come out and said that this is what he's planning on doing, is this going to impact how you view the Raptors guys?
Yeah, I think I was tilting that as we got off our show yesterday. I was like, oh, so the Toronto Raptors are just going to play a deeper rotation today out of the middle of nowhere. That's great. You still saw 35 minutes for a guy like Gary Trent. I think he's somebody that is on the table to be affected. Yuta Watanabe came in and played pretty decently in his 22 minutes. I mean, it's never going to show up in the box score with him. He's 3,500, but that's just not going to be a play with all of the guys in full force there. You always have the risk of a guy like Svi showing up randomly at times. Malachi Flynn, I wish I had just kind of gone with my gut. Well, this would have been the wrong slate, but it would have been something where like 26 minutes, I had said that Malachi Flynn was on the table for somebody who could play quite a bit yesterday. And that actually came to fruition. 26 minutes we saw out of him out of the middle of nowhere. He played 32 minutes in a start back in December. It's been a hot second. So that's one guy that I think could get more minutes. Obviously, Dragic doesn't exist. Gary Trent, he's going to maybe see some of the minutes come down off the top, but I don't think Pascal Siakam is at risk of seeing a crazy minutes decrease. Plus, the usage is already there. I'm going to just simply take the same approach where I'm going to play quite a bit over the field in the event that you have no Fred VanVleet there. But in the event that, he's there like I expect him to be tonight, I'm just going to be lower than the field.
I'm just uploading my lineups now. Let me tell you something, Eric. This is going to be an absolute disaster if James Harden ends up playing. It's just moves and swaps I don't want to do. It's going to be cashing out bets that I really like that I've already made. So just a total disaster if Harden ends up playing. That also is that I'm playing more of like LaMelo Ball. It was not somebody I thought I was going to be playing a whole bunch of. Now I want to play LaMelo Ball because I think he's a really excellent option relative to the other guys available if there's no James Harden. So it's just going to be a total mess if Harden ends up playing, but hey, we kind of have to take a stand on these sort of situations. So now I want to ask you about other forwards. Anybody else that we haven't mentioned at the position that's going to be a priority making into a lot of your lineups?
I guess we could talk about Porzingis a little bit. I mean, he's got the upside. Everybody on a 10-game slate, now that we have some more value that exists, I'm looking for massive upside. He's 8,200 over on FanDuel and only 10% right now. I don't really see that changing. Obviously, power forward is going to be a very popular spot for me to be playing. Some of these Brooklyn Nets, we have James Johnson, possibly Blake Griffin, LaMarcus Aldridge at 5,700, like vaults up the board for me at literally zero ownership. So I'm looking at those guys right now as the priorities, but Porzingis later there, I don't know what that starting line is going to look like, but I know I'm going to be swapping quite a bit, and I could see myself landing on quite a bit of Porzingis. just against Portland, 110 total. No Tim Hardaway Jr. maybe makes for more usage for him as well. Number of paths where I think he could really pay off 8,200, 50 plus upside. No question about that. Nobody would question that. So I'm happy to be firing him up quite a bit. And then Jared Allen is not really going to get any attention concerning he got ruled in a little bit later here, but I don't really see a change to his minutes. I have him projected for 35. Let me see what we have for him. 33 minutes. So it's like the identical minute allotment for him. 7,600. We've seen some massive stock upside from him from time to time. Somebody that can get some blocks and just a double machine. Jared Allen is going to be literally unowned. So 7,600. I'm always intrigued on a 10-game slate to get to guys who have 50 plus point upside at like 2%.
Yep, I don't have any issue with that. Jared Allen was somebody I was going to like a whole bunch on the slate. What was it? Monday slate, the shorter slate. Jared Allen was one of my most rostered players. Then he gets downgraded to questionable. He gets ruled out, and that kind of obviously changed everything. But if I like Jared Allen on a points per dollar basis the other day, no reason I wouldn't like him as well today. It was just a sickness. I don't expect him to be any kind of real strict limitation. He only missed one game. Super chat from Uzi Azazov. Booker, LeVert, and Precious, or Cam Johnson, Bam, and CJ, FanDuel single entry. That is Cam Johnson, Bam, and CJ McCollum for me. Eric, Booker, LeVert, and Precious, or Cam Johnson, Bam, and CJ.
I mean, this Cam Johnson thing is just like changed drastically. I mean, he's still viable, fit 5K over on FanDuel, but now we're going to get Kessler, Edwards, DeAndre Bembry for 1,000 and 1,500 cheaper. If you're just going to go with that, I do like the second one a little bit more. Precious is going to be a tough get for me. I think that his minutes are definitely a risk based on what we saw yesterday. I got burned by it yesterday. That was really like the only thing I felt like kept us from the winner's circle. I mean, Greg was all over it yesterday. And so I just kind of followed his lead. And I feel like that was the only thing that was really kind of missing in our lineups. I do like the second one more.
All right, let's see. Anything else you want to talk about a forward? If not, we'll hit on center really quick before the show ends, which I'm not even going to let you answer that. We're going to hit on centers now.
Cool.
Starting with this. Play LaMarcus Aldridge. Eric and I are both on board. I'm not even going to let you answer that because we're short on time. I knew you like LaMarcus Aldridge too. Thanks. How much are you prioritizing Jokic, given that all the center plays that have opened up on this slate? You know, to me, Whiteside, that's going to be appealing. Biyombo, there's reason to like him. Where does Jokic fit into the mix for you?
Normally, I would do a lot of like crazy fun things, you know, if I were, you know, not on a show, which, you know, we're on a show every day here now. So I've kind of gotten to the point where I'm lazy and I just want to cap a guy. I'm going to play him in half my lineups on FanDuel. I think that that's about appropriate for me with how much value we have. I mean, his raw projection is nearly 20 fantasy points more than the next guy in Vooch on this slate. That is silly. Then it gets ridiculous. But I think Nikola Jokic here, just 11-8. I think the opportunity cost isn't really at center with him as much as it is like, what is Giannis's ceiling? What's Doncic's ceiling? What's, you know, a guy like DeJounte Murray, John Moran, a lot of guards to pay up for. Like, we got to look at him compared to those positions. And, you know, in the event that you get a 45 or a 50 out of a Hassan Whiteside, I think that you're going to want to probably be going that route more than Jokic. But I think half of my lineups, I'm already going to be 3-4x the field on that. We've got him projected for 17.4%. I'm just hard capping him and moving on with my day.
We have a super chat here from CS. First off, nice shirt, Eric. That's a good compliment.
Thank you.
Giannis or Luka? DK. I've been projected really similarly. If salary cap isn't an issue, Giannis is projected for almost no ownership today. So Giannis, I have them, like I said, I have them projected similarly. The only thing that's really a drawback is the price. But if you're able to roster him here, it seems like price isn't the issue. Give me a 3% owned Giannis.
Yeah, I've got on FanDuel, obviously he's a little bit more popular because salary is less of a thing there. I've got 45% of Giannis. I've got 31% of Luka. I think that's going to come down a little bit depending on obviously James Harden news and other things. But I think that's going to be about what it is. So I think Giannis is more of a priority for me.
All right, let's talk about some of these other centers now. And how are you handling the Suns situation? Bismack Biyombo, clearly a better spot for him than normally see. DeAndre Ayton out. JaVale McGee out. Frank Kaminsky, he's been out for an extended period of time. It would seem Biyombo just steps into massive minutes now. I'm not sure how much this changes his role because he was already playing more minutes than JaVale McGee. I just kind of think Jalen Smith is going to take the JaVale McGee role where, you know, Jalen Smith plays like 18 to 20 minutes that McGee was playing and Biyombo plays the rest of the center minutes. It doesn't mean I don't like Biyombo. I just like LaMarcus Aldridge better. I like Hassan Whiteside better. How do you feel about Biyombo, though?
I am specifically playing FanDuel so that I do not have to play Bismack Biyombo. I am legitimately, if you wanted to know what this was, why I'm playing primarily here, I can't deal with this dude anymore. He's 6,300 over on FanDuel. I have 2% of him, 2. And I'm just fine with that. I am not going to move off of that stance whatsoever. Sure, there is definitely some upside that exists for him. Do I think 50 burger like we saw against Indiana is in the cards? I would really hope not. His fantasy rate has been absurd, over 1.25 since joining the Suns. I mean, we're looking at that's fantasy points per minute. Let me just not say the number and then not add the qualifier. But like, I think Bismack Biyombo has been revelatory for them in a lot of ways, but he has not been revelatory for my lineups because it's so weird thinking McGee might eventually get more of the center split there. It hasn't been the thing. And now with no McGee there, I think Bismack Biyombo is certainly going to play 30 plus minutes. I'm just hoping that other guys in the range, 6,300, I'm just looking at his sample size over the course of a season. And maybe Chris Paul can just turn anybody into a viable center. But McGee and Ayton, they've just been okay. I don't see Bismack Biyombo as like a better fantasy producer than either of them, like long term.
Super chat here to answer from Bat Jones. Santi Aldama or Kyle Gay in cash tonight? Quit playing DFS. That would be the short way to answer that question. I'll save you all the money.
Is he trolling us? That has to be a troll.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Neither. And also, so a couple of questions here. Because somebody brought up, well, Jalen Smith isn't going to play. Who's playing the backup center minutes if it isn't Jalen Smith? The Suns don't have any other big men on the roster. I think Jalen Smith comes in and plays 18 to 20 minutes or so, the same minutes that JaVale McGee was playing before. They don't have any other centers other than Biyombo and Jalen Smith. I don't think Jalen Smith is the worst pivot in the world off of Bismack Biyombo, just given the split there. Not a high priority for me, but I think there's a case for it in tournaments. And let's talk about Hassan Whiteside, who I think is really going underrepresented in tournaments relative to his upside. Mm-hmm. Only projected for 9% ownership on DK. More popular on FanDuel where he's cheaper. He's currently projected for 26% ownership. Let me refresh. We did get a fresh run of ownership, so let's see what's changed. Whiteside now projected for 6% ownership on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he is projected for 23% ownership. There's a wide range of outcomes. Hassan Whiteside has just looked disinterested in playing basketball on some of these recent slates. You watch him, but he's not in shape. He's jogging up and down the court. He's letting guys score on him with these, but he scores fantasy points from time to time. And given that he's relatively low owned, particularly on DraftKings, I'm chasing the upside of Whiteside because we've seen it 1.2 fantasy points per minute this year. How are you approaching Whiteside?
I mean, open up my eager eyes. I'm Hassan Whiteside. Let's roll. I like him. He's my favorite center play, or was my favorite center play before we got all the news to be able to play as much of him as possible. Rashawn Holmes is actually probably my favorite tournament play on DraftKings. I'm just not playing over there as much. And FanDuel, I just think that I want to get to him a little bit less than I want to get to Jokic now, just because of how much ability we have to spend up. So I think that he's great. Like he stands out. 5,500 is just broken and wrong. I'm happy to get to him and let everybody else hopefully chase Biyombo, hopefully more than the 6% we're projecting.
Yeah. And I mean, that low ownership on Whiteside is really ridiculous to me, particularly on DraftKings, just because we know the upside is there. Mm-hmm. Can we count on it? Absolutely not. He's so unreliable. We saw that. Remember, there was that slate where it was 3,500. Like, no way Whiteside fails at this price. It's impossible. Then he went out and failed at that price when it didn't seem possible. So wide range of outcomes, but give me the upside when he's low owned. I would feel differently if we had Whiteside at 6,600 and he was expected to be 35% owned. Yeah, I wouldn't be interested in that case, but that's not the situation we're dealing with.
Everybody's saying Cam Johnson at the 5. I hope so. I hope Cam Johnson at the 5.
I love Cam Johnson tonight.
Yeah,
I love Cam Johnson tonight. And also, by the way, in terms of getting to Jalen Smith, I just think he's somebody to get like 5% of if you're playing a bunch of lineups. As for Cam Johnson, he's played 5% of his minutes at center this year. It's possibly plays center minutes, but I think Jalen Smith's going to be in the rotation, and Biyombo might get in foul trouble.
It makes a lot of sense. 15 seconds to go, folks.
If your lineups aren't in, you've made an error. You should have that done. Also, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you haven't done those things, you've also made an error. So help me out, help Eric out. I guess you could help Tyler out. Help Tyler afford lighting in his apartment so that he's not constantly in the pitch dark over there. Look at, he's going to be fancy and turn his light on.
Look,
look at him turn the lights on.
Can we producer cam this guy?
Fancy. No,
do it.
no, he doesn't want people to see his dirty room in the background behind him and his dog jumping around. But guys, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Eric and I are sticking around for another 30 minutes. It's locked. We're going to sit around. We're going to sweat the games. We're going to respond to whatever injury news we get. There's a lot of injury news still waiting to come out. So I'm going to recap some of the most important injury news, and a lot of it could be coming out in the next 30 minutes. The big one, James Harden, questionable. What's that?
Fox ruled out.
Okay, so we'll hit on that in a second, but other injuries that we're also going to have to hit on in these next 30 minutes if we get the news. Fred VanVleet, questionable. James Harden, questionable. Desmond Bane, questionable. Scotty Barnes, questionable. Will Barton, questionable. Brandon Clark, questionable. Lots of players' status is still up in the air, but let's hit on the Sacramento Kings now. The Kings, they were already without Chimezie Metu, already without Terrence Davis. Now we also have De'Aaron Fox out of the picture. Who's getting the upgrade here?
Buddy Hield, 5,200. It is so awful. I mean, Tyrese Halliburton automatically. Like, I was already accounting for him. I have 42% of him on FanDuel. I was already plugging him in. I had him projected over 40 fantasy points at 7,700. The assist rate, ridiculous. Usage rate, serviceable. I'm looking at everything with Halliburton as a full go. Tons of minutes, tons of opportunity. Harrison Barnes, a little bit of a bump, but he's 6,100. And I do think that I want to be paying down for some of these Brooklyn guys coming up a little bit later. So a guy like him, Rashawn Holmes, 5,900, less of a talking point for me. He is my favorite guy in general that I liked over on DK and for tournaments at the center spot. Too cheap, too many minutes available to him here in this front court. And, with no Metu, I think that's a tiny bit of a bump for him as well. But now with this backcourt too, Davion Mitchell, 4,900, less of a talking point here. What's his tag over on DK?
Let's see. Davion Mitchell is
4,400. That's not good enough.
Yeah, 4,900 on FanDuel, 4,400 on DK. Project for no ownership right now. By the way, also, James Harden has not been ruled in. So whoever was saying that in the chat, we've timed them out. No need for fake news. We only get our news from the green check marks on DraftKings. None of this nonsense in the YouTube chat. We wait to get our green check marks on DraftKings. As of now, James Harden, questionable to play. We don't know if he's in or out. It doesn't mean he's definitely out. I'm making the assumption that he's probably out. I think it's more likely, but he could still play also. We don't know. No update on James Harden. Don't be going spreading nonsense in the YouTube chat. All you're doing is being an asshole for a couple of people. All right.
Davion Mitchell starting. Halliburton, Mitchell, Barnes, Bagley, Holmes, keeping Hield in his rotation there.
I'm pretty surprised by that. Very surprised by that, in fact, because Hield started the second half yesterday, and that was with Fox there.
This is stupid. And Buddy Hield was the guy that I had like 28% of at 5,200. Look, I still like Buddy Hield. He's still going to project for 30 plus minutes here for me, but I'm very surprised that Davion Mitchell's getting the start.
As am I. Let's see. What have we seen from Davion Mitchell in starts this year? And also
one start all year. One. We're going for one.
Let me pull up Prize Picks also, and let's see what Kings guys are in here, because they're also sponsoring the show, so we could tie this in as well. Prize Picks. If you guys are new to the site, you can sign up using the promo code Awesemo, get up to a $100 bonus on your first deposit, and you get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Let's see. Do we have Kings guys in here? Halliburton. Looks like they've been pulled down, so we can't break this down from that standpoint. Let me just scroll through. Any guys? Yeah, nobody from Sacramento right now in there. So let's just talk about Davion Mitchell starting. And in that one start that you said he made, Eric, he played 29 minutes. He scored 24.5 fantasy points. Who was out in that game? Let's see. So in the game that Davion Mitchell started, Rashawn Holmes was out, Marvin Bagley was out, Terrence Davis was out. So they just went with a smaller lineup. It's a totally different situation. We can't even draw any conclusions from that. How much do you think Mitchell ends up playing?
I don't know, but somebody said he smashed in that start. He put up 23.9 at 4,700. We have different definitions of smash. The guy is not a phenomenal fantasy point per minute producer. 0.75 on the season. He would have to really play like 34, 35 minutes. Now, is that in the range of outcomes in a start here? Sure. They're shorthanded. I said that this was a spot we were going to kind of be looking to. I still like Hield more. I'm still probably going to play more of him at 5,200 than I am Davion Mitchell, 4,900. In fact, it might be a good thing just because I think Hield has the kind of upside that can maybe win you a tournament. I don't know unless Davion Mitchell, who is a admittedly great defender, unless he adds like 4 or 5 stocks, I don't know what you're really looking at with him is a priority. Somebody said that I'm a genius. I played him in 40% of lineups. That's the wrong slate to be doing that, I think.
A genius for playing who?
Davion Mitchell ahead.
I mean, you could swap if you want to play Davion Mitchell. You could swap to him now. It's not the slate started. You could take him out of lineups. You could put him in. If you have him in lineups, cool. I mean, I'm making swaps right now. I'm going to play Davion Mitchell. I'm not going to play him in 45% of my lineups or whatever the number was. But I think I certainly think he's a viable value option. I don't think I'm going to get to Buddy Hield, at least not on deep. FanDuel's a different story.
Eric, stop freaking out. I'll freak out when I want to freak out. And I'm
Eric,
not freaking
by the way,
out.
if you guys think this is Eric freaking out,
what
first
are you
of all,
talking about?
Yeah, Eric, he's not crying. He's not crying. He's keeping his composure. He's not, there's not some flop sweat. His toupee isn't falling off his head. Eric's keeping it together. He's looking good right now. You guys think Eric is panicking. You've never seen Eric panic before.
If this is me upset, I mean, what is it when I'm actually upset? Am I like, I don't know. This is Calm Eric. Yes, exactly. Yeah, Chad is out of its GD mind today. Out of your GD mind. But yeah, you can't spell freak without an E. That makes sense. But yeah, he'll be the best defender. I said he's a great defender, admittedly. He'll guard Trae Young, but at the same time, we're talking about fantasy, and how he does in real life basketball does not matter to me. I think Jay Crowder, real life confirmed great at basketball, not a guy that I love to roster in fantasy very often.
Yeah, no, he's a juiced up PJ Tucker for fantasy purposes. We do have some super chats here to catch up on. Then we'll hit on prize picks until more breaking news comes out. Orion, FanDuel GPP, McCollum and Aldridge, or Halliburton and Holmes. Well, that's an interesting 2v2 considering the news that we've just gotten. McCollum and Aldridge or Halliburton and Holmes. I like both of those combos quite a bit. Do you have a lean?
Play a lot of them. More. If you told me to play one, I think McCollum Aldridge is going to have lower ownership because that didn't have it. It's further away. I don't know how much people are getting to Aldridge as much. Like Halliburton and Holmes are pretty clear cut right now. Holmes is actually not a great. It's not a great tag over on FanDuel. Like I'm not getting to a ton of him at 5,900, so I'll probably go McCollum Aldridge.
I love Aldridge, so that has to be my answer for me personally. Yep. McCollum Aldridge, a couple more of these to hit on. Ryan Nelson, our guy. Iowa State needs to stop bleeding. +3.5 tonight. Eric, what do you think?
Dude, you're telling me this has been brutal between our football season, which was probably the most disappointing football season I've ever had since what was it, 15 years ago, 16 years ago? I'm 34, went to school there, played golf 18. So 16 years ago. In all of those years, this is the most disappointing season because we were expected to be good coming off of beating Oregon and a bowl game that actually meant something, 10-win season, all of the great things. And then basketball, we were expected to be dog shit again. And we come out of the gate firing, just phenomenal. But then you run into this Baylor, Kansas, you run into this middle season, and there was just a gauntlet that they ran through. Hopefully they can right the ship, but I do not want to bet this team. They are too bipolar for me.
All right. And by the way, Sacramento's not locked. That game doesn't start for another 22 minutes. You guys can make some swaps there still. Another super chat from Austin Drake. Favorite DK plays for Knicks Heat? None.
0. I mean, Jimmy Butler was going to be the guy that I rostered a bunch. A lot of that became Giannis real quick. So I'm underweight I'm a little bit over. I have 15% Jimmy Butler. He's like the only guy I really want to be playing on FanDuel in that game.
Let's see. Well, yes, for DK.
That's not helpful. Sorry. Jimmy Butler's probably the only guy. Again, center's too stacked for me to want to try to take any BAM shots.
I don't really need to play 8,500 Jimmy Butler today either. I don't need to play 7,800 RJ Barrett. Gabe Vincent starting, but he's 5,300. There's not a single player in this game that I actually like. Something else to consider too. Tyler Hero is coming back. Tyler Hero back in the mix. That definitely dampens the appeal of Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, at least to a smaller extent. Somebody else taking shots there. I don't think anybody's a really strong play on DraftKings. We have so much value on the slate, and this is a game with a ridiculously low total. So that total for that game is 202.5. The second lowest total on the slate is 213 in the Clippers Magic game that already started. Total more than 10 points lower than any other game on the slate. I just don't think there's reason to get exposure there.
Yeah. I mean, Bam Adebayo, can he go out, put up 25 and 10 and be viable? Sure. But center's too stacked. I'm not going to do it. I get it. If you want to take that shot, it's not going to be for me. Even on FanDuel, like I don't want to be wasting a roster spot on him. What
he just asked, this is for Showdown. Okay. All right. So I did not run Showdown. I did not run Showdown lineups for that. So let me really quick pull up some of the pricing. You left us another super chat. My apologies. I did not realize they were asking about the Showdown contest. So I'll pull that up and look through some of the stuff there. While I'm pulling that up, another super chat from Crooked Samaritan, Davion Mitchell or Jalen Brunson, FanDuel GPP. Wildly different price ranges.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just Davion Mitchell is not a priority for me. I don't have any desire to go nuts with him. I'm gonna maybe get to like 3 or 4%, 4,900. I just don't think he's a good play still in the starting lineup. I think he would have to really go nuts to outperform his 0.75 DraftKings points per minute rate on the season. Sure, there might be some extra usage. He's had some of these spike games, even, in that 30 minutes. Like I said, he went 3 for 15 the other night against Boston. But there was a lot of that he played without Halliburton on the floor because they were getting annihilated, and he got some garbage time runs. So I'm not looking at him as a priority on this slate whatsoever. Jalen Brunson, definite priority on FanDuel.
All right. So circling back to Austin's question from before. I pulled this up. So the player I project for the most fantasy points here is Jimmy Butler. That would be my favorite captain play. No real surprise there. In the mid-range, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, I think both of them are underpriced. If we're going really cheap, I hate to say it, PJ Tucker's only 3,600 in Showdown. For a one-game slate, I don't think he's a bad value option. Looking for a value option from the Knicks, I'd be most apt to go to Taj Gibson. He's going to play the backup center minutes today behind Mitchell Robinson. Mitchell Robinson also isn't 100%. He's dealing with an ankle injury. So maybe that means we get like 20 minutes out of Taj Gibson and 28 out of Mitchell Robinson. Given an $1,800 salary for Taj Gibson, I think that is viable as a value play. Nerlens Noel out, so backup center minutes there for Taj Gibson. Definitely the Miami Heat players look better than the New York Knicks players. So a little more of a priority on rostering some of those Heat guys.
Man, he got his money's worth on that one. Well done, Greg.
I felt bad because he left 2 super chats on it because we didn't really comprehend the question there. Daytona Mixon left us a super chat. No question there, just left a super chat. Appreciate you. If you have a question, you could follow up. He left another super chat here with no question. Daytona, if you have a question, just leave it in YouTube. I assume you meant to ask a question and didn't. So if you have a question, leave it in chat and at me, and I'll be able to find it. All right, let's get on over to PrizePicks. Let's try to jam in some props really quickly, Eric, before we get the hard news or whatever else is going to break, because this is going to be pretty important news for the slate. And I have a feeling it's going to break like as soon as we start talking about PrizePicks. So if you could go to OddsShopper and just pull up who are some of the players with the most positive props, most likely to hit on the slate, we'll compare it to the numbers at PrizePicks. Yeah,
so let me pull up OddsShopper here as we go. Hopefully you guys were paying attention when Greg and I went into our phone mode. Normally, if I'm hosting a show, Greg will pull out his phone and you know what he's doing. He's betting as fast as he humanly possibly can to account for some major news. Well, the major news already dropped. James Harden questionable. That made Patty Mills looking at his 19.5 points plus rebounds plus assists. I smashed that as fast as I could. We had no Bembry was listed, but LaMarcus Aldridge as well. You just want the timing of it really matters. Even Rashawn Holmes is the guy that we still have on the board there. 18.5 points plus rebounds plus assists. I like that one a lot. I think just, if it was just points and rebounds, maybe we could get a little bit of a lower number there, but throwing assists in there, I'm still projecting him for well north of that number. I think that's a great spot to be invested. Too expensive on FanDuel, but DK, I've brought it up a bazillion times that I really like him there. And I think this 18.5 number is simply too low. So is that still on the board for you, Tyler, Rashawn Holmes?
Let's see. Rashawn, before when I looked at the Kings players, we do have Rashawn Holmes. By the way, 25 fantasy points over under for Rashawn Holmes. I like the over there quite a bit.
Yes.
Let's see. Rashawn Holmes, his name does not have a P in it. That's certainly 18.5 points plus rebounds plus assists. I love the over on that.
Well, check this out. This is kind of fascinating, and I'm curious when Price.
By the way,
is going to.
Sorry. Daytona left us the question here.
Oh, cool.
Porzingis and Aldridge or Siakam and Keldon Johnson? That is Porzingis and Aldridge for me. I'm really going to like Siakam if we get Fred VanVleet and or Scotty Barnes up, but we just don't know that information right now. It's also the tail end of a back-to-back. We just found out that Nick Nurse said that the rotation is going to be 9 to 10 players. So it's a situation where I like Siakam, but as of now, Porzingis, Aldridge, and I really like getting to Aldridge today. How about you? Porzingis, Aldridge, or Siakam, Keldon Johnson?
The first one by a landslide.
Yeah. Okay.
Landslide.
So there we go with that. Some other news here. Brandon Clark, game time decision, but Taylor Jenkins appears optimistic that he's going to play. Will Barton is active today. All right, let's get back to prize picks and trying to find some good props here. And let's jam some in before we find out that James Harden is going to be in or out in the next few minutes.
That sounds lovely. So I was going to say the one thing that's fascinating. Odd Shopper updates real time, does a great job. It looks like Davion Mitchell, the under on his points. He's gone up to 12.5. Looks like the going rated in a number of spots. I don't know if that's going to be on prize picks right now. Because I don't think he was somebody that was really applicable to the slate that much. Yeah, he's not listed there. So that's a bummer. That would be a great under, looking at a 76% expected win percentage there. You said Jimmy Butler, that's not necessarily a spot or a game. Just in aiming there, Bam Adebayo is a great passing big. I've brought it up a lot on shows, and Jimmy Butler, 7.5 assists. That's a little bit high to me. I've got him projected south of 6 on that. Odd Shopper has him right at 6, and that's still coming in with a 75% expecting win percentage. I'm more concerned with that number than I am expected ROI, because obviously there's no prices to be concerned about over on prize picks. So taking the under on 7.5 assists looks really good for Jimmy Butler in this spot.
Yeah, I like it too, especially considering the total in that game is so ridiculously. By the way, before I said the total was 203.5, I just pulled up Sportsbook to check where it was at now. 201.5. That total is dropping quickly. There are not going to be a lot of possessions in that game. Give me some unders there. So I am definitely on board with that. Something else that I think is kind of interesting of note, Max Strus, inactive today, will not be playing for the Heat. Not even a situation, no injury, just healthy DMP, not in the rotation. Did you catch what Jimmy Butler said about him like a week ago?
No, I did not.
Okay. It was actually something that I think Ryan posted in our group chat, but a reporter had asked Jimmy Butler a question about Max Strus, and Jimmy Butler was like, yeah, that guy sucks. It's like, I have to pass him the ball sometimes because he's open, because nobody guards him because of how terrible he is. He goes, but Max Strus is not good. It was really funny.
That's Jimmy Butler. Really a man after my heart. I think he was misunderstood in Philadelphia. I would definitely, having him and Anthony Edwards in the same, they're both wings, but like, oh my God, them playing together in Minnesota alongside Cat or D'Lo. I mean, that would be the most entertaining thing ever. Too bad they hate each other and Cat and Butler can never get along.
I don't think that, I don't think that Jimmy Butler would go for Anthony Edwards antics at all.
No,
I do not think he would be cool with that.
Calling himself Black Jesus, that wouldn't fly.
No, none of that. Oh, okay. Yeah, none of that is going to fly with Jimmy Butler.
I love Anthony Edwards. I mean, yesterday was peak Anthony Edwards in like every facet. Like, he truly believes and sometimes will be the best basketball player like on the floor at all times. But like, even when he's completely broke and making nothing, he still knows that he's the best basketball player on the floor. It's just, I can't believe that he fits into the fabric of this team as well as he does.
Yeah. By the way, also people were really crapping on StatMuse. Did you see the StatMuse stat on Anthony Edwards?
No, I didn't.
It was the second player in NBA history to have a 40-point game with 0 assists.
Kobe Bryant. Welcome to the Kobe Bryant Club. Can we start talking about Kobe Bryant's place in the top 10 players of all time and if he belongs?
James Harden officially out. There we go. Let's go. And by the way, that asshole who was in chat telling everybody that that James Harden was going to play today.
We need to go back and block him.
Shame on you. Shame on you. All right. So first of all, am I excited about my Denver Nuggets bets now?
Oh, am I excited about Patty Mills overs and LaMarcus Aldridge overs and Kessler Edwards overs? just smash them.
Fred VanVleet and Scotty Barnes both listed as active. Doesn't mean that they're necessarily playing. Just listed as active, chance they play. By the way, officially, James Harden is listed as active, but he's not going to play. That goes to show sometimes where players are listed doesn't really matter all that much. Obviously, if somebody's listed out, they're not going to play, but active doesn't always matter. But James Harden is out today. So let's look at some of the implications in that. First of all,
we are going to make so much money today, y'all. Let's go.
Let's see. Prize picks. Do we have stuff on? No, they don't have prop. They pulled all the props for the Nets, but all right, let's break down the Nets here. Luckily, you and I, we were prepared for this. We were already expecting the Nets to not have James Harden. Lucky us. Us.
This is why you watch these shows, y'all, because here's the thing. There's going to be a lot of shows. There's a lot of things you can do and watch and whatever else. The questionable, in 0.4 seconds, Greg and I were like, he's out, done. And we just started adjusting to it. And this is the difference between having a really good day in NBA DFS and a really bad day. And it doesn't matter the results. The results do not matter. What matters is the process and getting it in good as much as you humanly possibly can to put yourself in the position to have those Alex Baker, Steve Buzzard, Rinpack type days. That's what we're gearing for.
Yeah, and I'm looking to see if we could find a Nets starting lineup here. I haven't seen a Nets starting lineup.
It's not going to come out yet. It's not going to come out till this show's over, more than likely.
Yeah, pretty good chance of that. But let's start getting into this. Mm-hmm. Which players from the Nets are you going to prioritize the most with James Harden now confirmed not playing tonight?
So Patty Mills was the first guy. I talked about that earlier. Nearly 30% usage, nearly 30% assist rate. He's going to have to do everything for this basketball team. He's going to be in a lot of pick and roll situations with the LaMarcus Aldridge. Like, this is 2013. They played together in San Antonio. I guess it would have been later than that because he came from Portland. It would have been like around 2018 or so. But LaMarcus Aldridge, Patty Mills have some familiarity together. Those are the two guys you want to be rostering in bulk here. LaMarcus Aldridge, I know he's a little bit, it looks jarring to see 5,700 for him. Doesn't matter. He's underpriced. He's just a phenomenal play here. What really gets fascinating is trying to figure out who else to go to. Kessler Edwards on FanDuel, an absolute smash, no doubt about it. You have all the opportunity shot attempts. 4,300, I think, on DK is fantastic, but 4K on FanDuel is more fantastic. DeAndre Bembry, 3,400. We both expect that there's really no shot that he doesn't start unless they just take like the Bruce Brown approach, in which case play Bruce Brown. He's 3,200. He's a $200 pivot. Should be pretty simple. Cam Thomas becomes kind of a wild card guy. He can be a bucket. He can get called upon to play like 30-ish minutes in spots. We saw 33, 35 minutes against OKC and the Pelicans, all of like just short of 2 weeks ago. So I don't want to go without him, but for me, the most intriguing spot to get overweight to that nobody's going to be rostering is going to be James Johnson, Blake Griffin. I think finding which one of those two you can project for minutes in the absence of Day'Ron Sharpe, somebody's going to have to be playing backup for LaMarcus Aldridge. And LaMarcus Aldridge, I don't know if he plays for 32, 33, 34 minutes or something like that. I hope so. That's kind of what we're gearing for. And a lot of starts he's gotten up to that number. So that's what I'm assuming. But backing up the four, I think they're going to rotate some guys in there. And I think James Johnson, huge opportunity. Blake Griffin, huge opportunity. Fred VanVleet ruled out. Mother crap.
And Fred VanVleet out, Scotty Barnes in. So here we go. Run up more news. By the way, I just ran a set of lineups. Really quick one that is just to make sure I have, some semblance of a lineup that's uploaded with a bunch of Nets value players. But in the build I have right now, just so people know how I'm prioritizing some of the Nets guys, it hasn't really changed that much for me because I was kind of assuming this was going to be the case anyway, that the Nets weren't going to play. But I didn't want to go too crazy on the Nets guys just in case Harden was in. But still, Patty Mills, Cam Thomas, DeAndre Bembry, LaMarcus Aldridge. I'm getting to a ton of those guys. Kessler Edwards, a little bit less. We'll see what that starting lineup looks like. But here we go. Toronto Raptors. Let's hit on this news now. So just to recap, for the Toronto Raptors today, we have no Fred VanVleet, no Khem Birch. He's been out for a while. Scotty Barnes was listed as questionable. He's going to be in. One other piece of news that matters here is also while addressing the media earlier in the day, we saw Nick Nurse tell them that because of the way that the schedule is working back-to-backs, he's going to extend the rotation a little bit. Do I totally buy him? No, I think he just realized that he screwed up Fred VanVleet's knee a little bit. And he was like, I think I have to play more dudes. So, but either way, we can't go out and expect like, 40 plus minutes for Siakam, Anunoby, Barnes, that's not going to be the case. They're still going to play mid 30s, mid to high 30s, but a little bit of a dial back in terms of minutes. Who are you prioritizing the most from Toronto now?
Okay, so I'm just looking over here at FanDuel specifically. So I know you're playing more on DK, so I'll let you speak to that. I was flying through both DK and FanDuel with the Brooklyn stuff, so I'll fly through this. Pascal Siakam, I project for now north of 40 fantasy points. Prioritize him, 8,900. I think that's just way too cheap for him. OG Anunoby, still a little too expensive at 6,800. I'm more inclined to go to more Gary Trent at 5K. And then Scotty Barnes just really takes a jump. Gary Trent's going to have to play point guard here, and that's the way that it looked like yesterday. And this is a Raptors starting lineup: Trent Jr., Anunoby, Barnes, Siakam, Achua. So exactly what we expected. But Achua is 3,700. God, I still want to take some shots on that. I don't know what the minutes look like, but there are minutes upside for him still here. I know Scotty Barnes. I don't know how many he's going to play. We have him projected around 33. Precious Achua is just 3,700. It's more of a price play. I prioritize every Brooklyn guy over top of him. I think even taking shots on Jalen Smith, it's almost like the identical spot, but a little bit improved to go to Precious Achua, where, if he plays 20, 22 minutes, could still be viable at a cheap tag, but definitely not a priority. Scotty Barnes priority, Pascal Siakam priority, Gary Trent priority, all FanDuel.
Yeah, and for DK purposes, I think ideally I would like to get to some of Chris Boucher. I'm just not going to, though, because he's priced. He's coming off the bench where he's priced. He started last game. He played 30 minutes, but also some of that was due to foul trouble. There's clearly upside in Chris Boucher. I just have to prioritize other players. If I get to a small amount of them, cool, but he's coming off the bench now. And it's hard for me to kind of trust Precious Achua, too, even at 3,800. Once again, I think there's an opportunity for upside, but given this news we have about Nick Nurse playing these guys extended minutes and that Precious are extending the rotation, and just the fact that Precious Achua didn't play massive minutes last game, it's hard for me to project him super well.
Yeah, I'm saying for FanDuel, 3,700, he has power forward eligibility. He doesn't take a center spot away. If you're in Cruncher, you can literally just say, I do not want to play him at a center spot, and I think that's fine. He's 3,700. For me, it just comes down to if he gets to 26 minutes, 28 minutes, there's definitely a path where we've played like a mid 4K, mid 5K Precious Achua in spots. He's been serviceable. He was obviously playing more minutes, but 0.85 fantasy points per minute on FanDuel over the course of the season. I think 22 minutes, 24 minutes, he gets into the range of play even on this slate. So I'm going to get to a little bit.
Yeah, I'm getting to a good amount of Siakam. Going to prioritize Siakam here. No real contrarian take there. Although Siakam's probably going to be underrepresented, wouldn't you think, in tournaments at this point?
Totally. I'm going to get to more of them. I said I was going to get over the field in the event that there was no Fred VanVleet on FanDuel. Yeah,
so rerunning lineups, I have 40% Siakam now. I had some Siakam before, not that. What's that?
Identical. I had 38% on FanDuel.
Okay, yeah. So we're really similar. Uploading that set of lineups now, and here we go. All right. Let's try to leave the people with one more prize picks prop that we really like to get to today, Eric, because we didn't get to hit on as much of the odd chopper and prize picks as we normally would, because it's not that often that Fred VanVleet and James Harden get ruled out in the last 30 minutes of the show. Also, this is why you should be sticking around every single day for these last 30 minutes that Eric and I do together when we hang out. Players get ruled out. It impacts lineups. Sure, we're talking about prize picks, but it doesn't mean we're not tying in DraftKings, FanDuel, and Yahoo and all of that as well. If you are new to prize picks, sign up using the promo code Awesemo. Get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum, also up to $100 bonus on your first deposit. Let's see. Do they have Siakam props? They do have Siakam props up. Oh, boy. This is a good place for us to close with. Let's see. What are points plus rebounds, assists? 38.5 points plus rebounds, assists for Pascal Siakam. Over.
Over is the right answer.
Let's see. Where do I have him? Yeah, I have him close to 30.5. Actually is not as far off as I thought it was. It's still an over for me, but maybe not exactly. Let's see. Where's he at fantasy score, Siakam? Yeah, over under 46 fantasy points. That is an over for me, but it's not like a crazy strong lean. Let's see if I can find one more number on Odd Chopper to give to the people on the way out. You updating your lineups, Eric?
Yeah, flying.
Okay. Yeah, you do that. I'm looking for a prop to.
Got it. All right.
Looking for a prop to give to the people over on Odd Chopper.
Oh, Odd Chopper from for a good old prize picks finale. How about this? So I just love it. I'm going to go back to my old trusty free throws made prop. we're going to go to some Nikola Jokic. Again, Nikola Jokic, I think you could just take his fantasy score and look at that pretty much every single day and probably get it in good. Now that's up around 60, and I'm not looking at that. But, I mean, this front court is just ridiculous that is going to be guarding Nikola Jokic. I see a lot of foul trouble possibly in store. I said I think they could rotate through the likes of Blake Griffin, James Johnson. I don't think any of them are going to have a great time guarding Nikola Jokic, but Nikola Jokic is definitely somebody that is just getting to the line at a ridiculous pace here as well. We've seen 7, 10, 16 attempts in 3 of his last 4. So if you wanted to find a prop that's actually doable for Nikola Jokic, that's one.
All right. That is going to do it for us, guys. Be on the lookout for the Nets starting lineup. It's going to drop probably the next 10, 15 minutes or so. That should be massively important in terms of building your lineups. Also, get some Pascal Siakam in your life now that Fred VanVleet's rolled out. That is going to do it for Eric and I today. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel on the way out. Good luck tonight.